Shabbat Shalom from under the dome, Hebrews and Shebrews. This is the Unexpected Cosmology, and as always, my name is Noel Joshua Hadley. This has been, I think, a pretty exciting Sabbath for a lot of the people here in the community. I know, hopefully I'm not giving away too much information, but I know that Rebecca is partying it up in Texas with Katie and her family. And I'll just call myself the matchmaker here, that they were able to meet at the Unexpected Cosmology. And of course, John Q and his family came out to visit here in sunny Florida. Of course, they live in Florida, but completely opposite in the state. And where I'm camped out on the beach, and we just had a great conversation. And I was really tripping my neighbors out because I'm in an RV park, and we're all parked, 3 feet apart. And I could, as I'm out there talking for like 3 or 4 hours to John Q, I'm looking over, and he's just like, he couldn't believe what he was hearing coming out of my mouth, because I believe it or not, I'm a very silent, quiet guy. I keep to myself. I don't talk to people. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, this is who I'm parked next to. So that was, it might make for an interesting conversation this week as he approaches me with some questions. But anyways, here we are. And I dropped the PDF in the general voice chat. This is called The Hidden Wilderness. I want to get right to it because I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think this is going to be epic, either epically good or epically bad. We'll find out which. And again, let's get right to it. I do recommend, you could listen along, but I do recommend, if you are capable, if you're at a computer, to follow along, because it may be hard to visualize some of what I'm talking about, particularly later on in the presentation. But here we go. This is The Hidden Wilderness by yours truly, Noel Joshua Hadley. First publication, October 18th, 2022. And I have been busily hacking away at this over the last couple of weeks. If you've been looking at the updates on cosmology, I've been every couple of days adding new sections to this. Many of us have been saying the globe deception was intended to hide the creator for some years now, but we were only partially correct. Hold on, let me adjust this. It wasn't simply designed to hide the greater realm either. That also is a legitimate answer. Still not the whole of it, though, because although both answers complement each other exceptionally well. I might as well go ahead and state what so many of us have already been thinking. The ultimate purpose of the globe deception was to hide the very whereabouts of Yahushua HaMashiach on this earth. If you can hear baby Rivka crying in the background, that's the beautiful daughter. And she's in the room with me now. All right, that's my life now. Continuing, the camp of Yah you already know about. It's on the motionless plane. Some suspect Hyperborea as the hideout of the saints, and I expect to talk about that location several pages on down the road. Just know that I'm broadening my horizons to entire unknown continents. That's what I mean by the hidden wilderness. There is a great deal of land out there, so much so that the known continents of our world, Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas, are probably dwarfed in comparison. Our controllers know all about it. They're simply not letting us in on their secret. I've even found a passage in Scripture which makes mention of it, the hidden wilderness, and this is what we read. For behold, the time will come when the signs which I have foretold to you will come to pass, that the city which now is not, shall appear, and the land which now is hidden shall be disclosed. 2 Ezra 7:26. The city still to appear is New Jerusalem. That doesn't happen until the very end of the timeline. Jerusalem's arrival signals our controller's end, Satan's end, sin's end. It is the heights of the eighth great day. After 7,000 years of his story, the earth is finally cleansed. And look what happens. The land which is now hidden shall be disclosed. The arrival of one is tied in with the revealing of another. What land and where? Don't ask me to show you on a map. It's not on a map. Certainly none which has ever escaped the Vatican vault. No, not even Hyperborea is it. The land is totally concealed. Just because I can't give you roadside directions doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The far more likelier scenario is that we have no trustworthy maps to begin with. Most people probably think the hidden wilderness resembles something like this, which is probably one of my favorite childhood movies, the original King Kong. A primeval island buried in fog where claymation dinosaurs and the Kong take up mortal combat so as to decide the fate of a silent film actress. I couldn't tell you as I've never been there. Don't you find it interesting, though, that post-mud flood literature is replete with tales of a hidden wilderness? Jules Verne gave us Mysterious Island. Jonathan Swift wrote Gulliver's Travels. Not to overlook Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. I checked, they're all Freemasons. Defeating an idea is often as cold and calculating as trivializing it with fiction. Speaking of claymation dinosaurs, what if I told you that the hidden wilderness is painted with the familiar strokes of Kong Skull Island when it is described elsewhere in Scripture? It's in Enoch, too. You will have to read it for yourself to see what I mean. And this is what it says. And when the day and the power and the punishment and the judgment come, which Yahuwah of spirits have prepared for those who worship not the righteous law. Wonder what that righteous law is. And for those who deny the righteous judgment, and for those who take his name in vain. That day is prepared for the elect a covenant, but for sinners an inquisition. And on that day were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Duoden on the east of the garden where the elect and righteous dwell. Where my grandfather was taken up, the seventh from Adam, the first man whom Yahuwah of spirits created, and I besought the other angel that he should show me the might of those monsters, how they were parted on one day and cast, the one into the abysses of the sea, and the other unto the dry land of the wilderness. And he said to me, Thou son of man, herein thou dost seek to know what is hidden. First Enoch 65-9, the R.H. Charles version. Why am I not surprised to learn that a judgment occurred on all those sad souls who neglected to guard the Torah? A familiar theme. Those individuals undoubtedly denied that they would be judged righteously for doing away with it. And it says they deny the righteous judgment, which is interesting. But that's how the story of Pollyanity goes. The splitting apart of Leviathan and Behemoth are equally important to what's going on. I am fully convinced that Leviathan is both a spiritual and literal representation of Sheol, which is precisely where the unrighteous go, into the mouth of Leviathan, the abysses of the sea. But then, contrarily, the righteous end up with Behemoth. We are told it is a waste wilderness east of Eden. You have to keep reading further to learn that the two of them, both Leviathan and Behemoth, are hidden. I attempted to look further into the name Duodain, but got no further than nobody else having the remotest clue, or the faintest clue. As you can see, though, that's where the guardians of the Torah dwell. Take me. I want to be there. What I aim to show over the following so many pages, it turned out to be 67 by the time this presentation began, is that the hidden wilderness being spoken about is the land of the immortals where Yahushua HaMashiach rules. It wasn't always so. During the millennial kingdom, he ruled over all the earth. But then one day he didn't. What happened? I have been trying to show you how it went down repeatedly. There was a rebellion against Messiah. What's new about that? Many chose to do away with the Torah, even during the millennial kingdom, probably because of grace and because they were sick and tired of spitting upon the cross, as they so often put it. I imagine the scene of Yahusha's departure resembled something as follows. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook, the Kidron brook, and all the people passed over toward the way of the Ith, the wilderness. 2 Samuel 15:23. The context has David departing Jerusalem after Absalom usurped his throne. The Hebrew word Eth in English means divine. Nearly all translators dump it from their Bibles, not really knowing what to do with it, but the Sefer leaves it in. And the translator comments on this in the beginning of the Sefer. David was leading his loyal subjects towards the divine wilderness. Make what you will of that. That's like saying they were passing into the ages, apparently. A very similar affair happened at the closure of the kingdom. It had to have. I am told all the time that such a prospect is impossible, as his kingdom is an eternal one. Well, it is. But then recall how Revelation ends. Nearly everyone seems to forget that part. The entire world is deceived by Hasatan and surrounding the camp of Yah, hoping to take it by force. Talk about dark. An event like that doesn't happen without first shedding some tears. David's plight from his son Absalom is not unwarranted. I believe I found the parallel millennial kingdom events. It's described for us in the Odes of Solomon. You can see a link there to the paper I wrote about a year ago on the millennial kingdom and the Odes of Solomon. Ode 42 specifically. I have already written commentary upon the importance of that book, as it was apparently penned by those identifying as the resurrected living upon the earth during Messiah's reign, having access to paradise. Well, here it is. This comes from the Odes of Solomon 42, 1-7. I extended my hand and approached my Adonai, for the expansion of my hands is his sign, and my extension is the upright cross that was lifted up on the way of the righteous one. And I became useless to those who knew me not, because I shall hide myself from those who possess me not, and I will be with those who love me. All my persecutors have died, and they sought me, they who declared against me, because I am living. Then I arose and am with them, and will speak by their mouths. For they have rejected those who persecute them, and I threw over them the yoke of my love. Like the arm of the bridegroom over the bride, so is my yoke over those who know me. And as the bridal chamber is spread out by the bridal pair's home, so is my love by those who believe in me. There is more to the ode, but we will not get into it. It's why I linked the Odes of Solomon paper above. Just know that the words being spoken to us derive from Yahushua HaMashiach. He's the one penning the article, or the ode. How do I know that? Well, you will have to read the ode for yourself to see why I've come to that conclusion, but here's a clue. The writer of this ode identifies himself as the very individual who entered Sheol and freed everyone. Those are the loved ones whom he speaks of here. The sons of Yasharel who had already died and came running towards him, crying, Son of Elohim, have pity on us. Good times. That scene, of course, happened in Sheol. With what little I have shown you, what do we learn about the writer of this ode? His persecutors sought him out and declared against him, past tense, because he is living. That tells us he has already been resurrected from the dead. Again, I know that to be the case because I've read the entire ode as well as the entire book. Sheol is specifically mentioned as being a past event. Death literally ejected him. He does speak in future tense, and it's to tell everyone he will hide himself from those who refuse to possess him. Who are these obstinate people if all his enemies who had killed him are dead? Must be the mortals inhabiting his kingdom, the Goyim. The lives of the immortal saints, as well as their Torah, simply don't do it for them. Don't let the phrase, I shall hide myself, escape you either. He's not talking about slipping through a hidden passageway behind the bookcase when Kiefer or Yochanan aren't looking, or ditching the paparazzi for several hours to go fishing. He's not giving up his crown or his kingdom, neither. He's simply hiding himself from the Goyim, his persecutors. They're already living their lives as if a thick darkness were obscuring them, so why not deliver them over to their own desires? To the axiom of old, ignorance is bliss. When saying, and I will be with those who love me, we can easily conclude it's not simply Yahushua who hid from those who refused to possess him. Those who loved him were also tucked away. They all left. We are not told where they are hiding, but that's a given, or else it wouldn't make for a very good hiding spot, would it? The location is simply described to us in the language of a bridal chamber. I am reminded of David's words when he wrote, For in the day of evil he shall hide me in his sukkah. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me upon a rock. Psalms 27:5. Where is this sukkah? the secret tabernacle that David hides in so as not to be found in the day of evil. Another syrupy metaphor, I'm sure, having little to do with anything, because many people, as you know, would have us thinking the Bible was written by the Hallmark Company. If I had to guess, it's in the divine wilderness spoken about in 2 Samuel. That's not a one-off, you know. The divine wilderness is mentioned elsewhere. This comes from Hosea 2:14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. And I will give her, there's Eth again, her vineyards from thence, and Eth, the valley of Echor, for a door of hope. And she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Mitzrayim. Husha 2:14. You see, twice is the Hebrew word eth employed to describe the wilderness which Yahuwah will allure the children of Yasharel into. Achor is a reference to the valley where Yasharel executed Achan and his household soon after the battle of Jericho. The word literally means trouble, affliction, or taboo, and implies the most severe degree. The contrast has Yasharel's arrival into this divine valley and the wilderness being amidst great turmoil and likened into the days when she came up out of the land of Mitzrayim. I'm in. Won't somebody give me the walking directions? If only anybody could point the way. No? Bummer. I guess we will have to wait for the final disclosure when New Jerusalem comes down. Before turning to other clues found outside of Scripture, here is one more passage which I feel expresses Yasharel as well as Yahusha's sentiments perfectly well. It comes from Proverbs 28:12. When the righteous triumph, there is great glory. But when the wicked rise, people hide themselves. All right, section 2, and we are on, if you need caught up, page 8. This is Hyperborea. Hyperborea, isn't it? The hidden wilderness. I bring it up merely because some of you were thinking it was. Then again, I have never been to Hyperborea, and so can't really say either way. All I am asking is that we broaden our horizon. I had started out saying the globe Earth deception was designed to hide the greater realm. Well, last I checked, Hyperborea still fits upon one. The hidden wilderness is further out and beyond what any globular map will allow for. Might as well start here, though. Perhaps there are clues to be found. The very concept of Hyperborea apparently originates with Greek mythology, but I have my serious doubts about that. The Hyperboreae were a people who lived in a northern paradise of perpetual sunshine beyond the reach of the north wind. Sorry, home troubles. Where was I? The Hyperborea were a people who lived in a northern paradise of perpetual sunshine beyond the reaches of the Elohim of the north wind. Its very name combines the prefix hyper, which means above, and boreas, denoting the north wind. You will tell me what I have just said, or what I have just described, sounds a lot like the hidden wilderness. Sure, it does. But who said anything about Hyperborea being the North Pole? We must unlearn what we have learned. It was the cartographer Gerard Mercator who identified Hyperborea with the pole when creating a polar projection of the Earth in 1569. A long time ago. Perhaps there were others who had earlier identified the pole, meaning he wasn't the first. But either way, it's all a probable misdirection intended to push away from the flat Earth. It is in the Mercator map, wherein an entire second map exclusively detailing the Arctic regions, and just look at, excuse me, and just look at it, why don't you? I spy a magnetic mountain and a continent with 4 separate rivers feeding the oceans of the world. Sounds very much like the Eden I've come to know. Perhaps we need to keep looking east of Eden then. Mercator didn't just make it up, you know. There were others who spoke of the place before our controllers decided not even the Hyperborea narrative fit into their construct, and promptly had them shut up. A story comes down to us from the middle of the 14th century, which has a monk with no name set off from Oxford, England for the Arctic Circle of all places. Who financed such an exposition, we are not told. he certainly wasn't the first to explore the area, which also tells us his financiers had an idea of what he should be looking for. During his travels, he wrote Inventio Fortunata, or The Discovery of the Fortunate Islands, which he afterwards presented to King Edward III. Every known copy would soon disappear. Uh-oh. But not all is a complete loss. Inventio Fortunata was orally by a certain Jacobus Noyen, by another monk who had read an original copy for himself. Noyen then wrote a summary of No Name's account in his own 1364 book, Itinerarium. For several hundred years, the truth of the North Pole has finally been made known. And it scratched that. Jacobus Noyen's book went mysteriously missing as well. Bummer. There really doesn't seem to be a happy ending to this story. But have hope. Before Noyen's Itinerarium became toilet paper, once they finally got around to inventing bathrooms, that is, Gerardus Mercator is said to have managed to get his hands on a highly coveted copy, which he apparently used as his basis for his 1569 atlas. And I highly even doubt that story right there. They do that just to make it look like he was superstitious or whatever. The monk with no name finally got his book summarized, perhaps conservatively, when Mercator described the North Pole as follows. In the midst of the four countries is a whirlpool, into which there empty these four indrawing seas which divide the north, and the water rushes round and descends into the earth, just as if one were pouring it through a filter funnel. Sounds fascinating. It is 4 degrees wide on every side of the pole, that is to say 8 degrees altogether, except that right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea. Its circumference is almost 33 French miles, and it is all of magnetic stone. Sounds like a page turner. There is that number again, 33. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if it springs up again before this is over tonight. But then look how through a filter funnel. It is for this very reason that I started our search for the hidden wilderness with Mercator's Hyperborea, because I highly suspect we have found our Leviathan. The North Pole is likely the abyss that we so often hear about. The entryway to Sheol. The Greeks referred to the same creature as Charybdis, the sea monster of Homer's mythology, and this is what we read of her. We then sailed up, so this comes from Homer's The Odyssey, Book 5, line 234. We then sailed on up the narrow strait with wailing, for on one side lay Scylla, and on the other divine Charybdis, terribly sucked down the salt water of the sea. Verily, whenever she belched it forth, like a cauldron on a great fire, she would seethe and bubble in utter turmoil, and high overhead the spray would fall on the tops of both the cliffs. But as often as she sucked down the salt water of the sea, within she could all be seen in utter turmoil, and round about the rock roared terribly, while beneath the earth appeared black with sand, and pale fear seized my men. So this monster, Charybdis, was a sea monster whose daily sucking and expulsion of water created the high and low tides of each passing day. She was believed to live under a small rock on one side of a narrow channel. Opposite her was Scylla, another sea monster that lived inside a much larger rock. The sides of the strait were within an arrow shot of each other, and sailors attempting to avoid one of them would come in reach of the other. And for whatever reason, I found an illustration there from a Star Trek comic book. If that makes any sense to you. If you're wondering why I put quotes on that, what I had just described, it's because the information was pulled from the Wikipedia. Well, the same divine being is described in Jason and the Argonauts, and Virgil's the Aeneid, and by Aesop, and as you can see here, Star Trek. I was able to track down Mercator's portrait, and so you will want to take note of his compass. How precious. It's so obvious now. Why didn't I see this a page or two earlier? Mercator was a Freemason. What else do you notice about his portrait? The compass is pressed against a globe rather than a square. Ridiculous. A globe isn't even a flat surface, but a square is. Do they think we're stupid? Wait, don't answer that. Setting stage right is Brigadier General Albert Pike, world-renowned 33-degree Mason. In case you haven't heard, he already explained to us the esoteric meaning behind the square and the compass. Follow the Magic Bunny Trail, and you shall see why Mercator's map and compass may be a truth, but only a partial truth. Certainly misdirection at best. Freemasonry describes itself as a, quote, a beautiful system of morality, somebody gagged me, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, unquote, all of which correspond with numbers of 3. For example, the 3 great lights of Masonry can be found illustrated on its familiar symbol, which involves the square, the compass, and the letter G. On the surface, we may conclude the G stands for God, or more specifically, the volume of sacred law, though we might also turn to geometry, G for geometry. I guess it's really debated what it ultimately is. In Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rites of Freemasonry, this is what Albert Pike had to say about them. You see the lodge, its details and ornaments, by its lights. You have already heard what these lights, the greater and lesser, are said to be. The Holy Bible, square, and compasses, not only styled the great lights in Masonry, but they are also technically called the furniture of the lodge. It is held that there is no lodge without them. Isn't that interesting that they consider the Bible a furniture piece? Though the Hebrew Pentateuch will be found on the altar of a Hebrew lodge, or the Quran in a Mohammedan one, it is these great lights, Pike insisted, by which a Mason must walk and work. It is the square and the compass, 2 important ingredients within the 3, which are pivotal for understanding and deciphering the hidden knowledge of Masonry. Only the adepts will understand the true meaning of the symbols, Pike warned. And here's what he says about it. Return now with us to the degree of the Blue Masonry, and for your last lesson, receive the explanation of one of their symbols. Here Pike further writes, you see upon the altar of those degrees the square and the compass, and you remember how they lay upon the altar in each degree. Well, here it is right here. The square is an instrument adapted for plane surfaces only, and therefore appropriate to geometry. There's the G for geometry, or measurement of the earth, which appears to be and was by the ancients supposed to be a plane. The compass is an instrument that has relation to spheres and spherical surfaces and is adapted to spherical trigonometry, or that branch of mathematics which deals with the heavens and the orbits of the planetary bodies. The square, therefore, is a natural and appropriate symbol of this earth, being flat and all, and the things that belong to it are of it or concern it. The compass is an equally natural and appropriate symbol of the heavens and of all celestial things and celestial natures. Albert Pike straight out says the purpose of the square is in the square and compass design, or I should say in the square and compass design, is to teach the neophyte that the earth is flat. Won't somebody tell me if I'm reading this all wrong? He says the ancients supposed it to be a plane, which they did. Pike's conclusion is, therefore.
What's up, buddy?
All right, I had to mute that. Okay, let's keep going. Madeline, if you would like to be unmuted later on, just let you know. Drop that. Let people know in the general voice chat, and they can. An admin can come along and unmute you. All right, where was I? Pike's conclusion is, therefore. The square, therefore, is a natural and appropriate symbol of the earth. Those globes they hand out are useless. They even state for decorative purposes only, as if that's not suspicious. Oh, sure, they may get you from Kansas City to Chicago, but forget about direct flights in the southern hemisphere, much less the greater realm. It gets worse, though. Way worse. The description of Hyperborea I quoted from derives from a letter which Mercator wrote to John Dee. Dun, dun, dun. Mercator and Dee were passing notes in class. John Dee, in case you haven't been fast asleep for the last few hundred years, was the court astronomer and advisor for Queen Elizabeth I. His students included Francis Bacon, promoter of the quote-unquote scientific method, and the astronomer Thomas Digges, who pushed a view which had the universe becoming infinite rather than contained under a solid firmament, as the ancients believed. In succeeding centuries, Dee was the inspiration for the character Dr. Faustus, Shakespeare's Prospero, as well as Ian Fleming's James Bond, as Dee's signature was 007. And then there is the numerical value of his name, which he freely boasted of in his writings. It was 666. I'm sure that's perfectly normal. As the Queen's quote-unquote science advisor, his duties included astronomer, mathematician, navigator, spy, Kabbalist, alchemist, and perhaps most important of all, celestial necromancer. I point out Freemasons often around here, but there probably isn't even a mask capable of repelling the repugnant spook fumes this guy let out in a single fart. The official narrative has Dee being born in 1527 and expiring in either 1608 or 1609. Are we dealing with a pre- or post-kingdom wizard? If I had to guess, I will claim afterwards, and then ask you to consider the implications. As the at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, I was personally able to observe Dee's polished obsidian mirror, by which it is said angels would appear to him. Yes, that's what I said. It is through the mirror that Dee was capable of organizing his new transcendence of knowledge, mathematics, optics, astrology, science, and navigation. Occultist Edward Kelly and he were likewise friends. Together they conversed in what they referred to as the Enochian language, which was taught to them directly through their stone of obsidian. It was while on tour in Poland, giving lectures on magic and alchemy to the elites, that Kelly was told by his celestial informants that the two were to swap wives, which they did for a night. 9 months later, Dee would raise Kelly's son as his own. Fun little biographical facts here. Seems like that's how the controllers learned to deceive humanity in the years leading up to Satan's release from the abyss. They channeled spirits. Angels were feeding Dee and others knowledge so as to reshape our realm in line with recent events. Kabbalah had a part in it, as well as the Talmud. Look it up on Wiki if you don't believe me. Dee was a Kabbalist. And so here's what the Zohar has to say about the shape of the earth. All the world rolls in a circle like a ball, these down and these up, and all the creatures in 6 lands, or continents, are different in their appearance in accordance with the differences of air in each place. Therefore, there are places in the world that when it is light for those on one side of the sphere, it is dark for those on the other side of the sphere. For these, it is day, while for those, it is night. And there is a place in the world where it is always day and there is no night except for a few moments. Zohar, Volume 3, on the portion of Vayikra, and so on and so forth. It's a globe, according to Kabbalism. The other curiosity here is the mention of 6 lands or continents. Today, the boundary marker of the globe Earth deception includes 7, where the writers of Kabbalah, including Antarctica or Australia in their accounts. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until a later hour, but then again, Australia wasn't either. I'm three-degree Freemason. What this tells us is that everything within his narrative comes by way of controlled opposition, precisely like the others before him who shaped our world. You get it? That was a little Jungle Cruise joke there. No, he was never trying to squeeze the truth from the teats of the golden calf. No, he wasn't flipping the establishment, the bird. No, they never needed to shut him up for claiming there was unseen land beyond the pole. You don't attain the 33 degree with loose lips. FYI, I wouldn't have the faintest clue how one ultimately becomes 33 if that's what you're asking, but I figure closeted tendencies towards the big I have something to do with it. Invitations are sent out. Lodge brothers arrive at the ceremony wearing a noose and an apron. everybody pinky swears ridiculous, but then becoming a 33 degree also involves proving your hand as a wizard. And Bird was very much one of those, in case you were wondering. Resumes such as Bird's often come with a family tree to match. Big surprise then to learn that his genealogy is as wild and resourceful as his adventures on Earth. The guy was quite literally American royalty. His 9th great-grandmother was Pocahontas, of all people. Royalty. But is he a Bush? You and I think alike, it seems, because I too had the same question. I checked. He is. Not to mention the Roosevelts and the Adams and numerous other United States presidents filling in the ranks of cousins, as well as Queen Elizabeth II and the British royals. They're all kissing cousins. I could go on, but let's look at a few familiar basics. I did a little extra digging, and this is what I came up with. Bird is directly descended from 12 Magna Carta sureties, thereby ensuring that the same lineup of Kane City entertainers and celebrities fill his family tree. 20th great-grandfathers include the following Magna Carta sureties: Hugh Le Bigod, William de Aubigny, John de Lacy, Gilbert de Clare, Robert de Ross, and John Fitz-Robert. 21st great-grandfathers are Richard de Clare, Saher de Quincy, Roger Le Bigod, Henry de Bohun, and Robert de Vere. There is one 26th great-grandfather, surety, Geoffrey de Say. Now, I bring these people up a lot because it seems that a lot of these very important people all over the world that control the narrative and flesh out the script are related to these same people directly, not as cousins, but as actual grandfathers. And so I like to point that out. And you can make of that as what you will. The other thing about Bird is he had a particular fondness for Eskimo boots and a cozy fur-lined hood. Under the circumstances, I can't blame him. But then going even further back into history, we find King Edward I, Bird's 18th great-grandfather, King Henry III, 19th great-grandfather, William the Conqueror, 24th great-grandfather, King Louis VI, 24th great-grandfather, King Robert I, 29th great-grandfather, Alfred the Great, 31st great-grandfather, and finally, last but certainly not least, Charlemagne, 33rd great-grandfather. And, I've possibly changing my opinion on some of this after going through the whole history of Great Britain and understanding that it was Millennial Kingdom center and that Judah is always the rulers and that they were put over the throne. It makes me wonder if some of these people, like the Marilyn Monroes, the Kennedys, all these people, they really were truly, they are the royalty of Israel, apostate Israel. But just throwing that out there, that there might be something true about these genealogies and why they're so important for the narrative. You have probably heard the one about Admiral Byrd visiting the North Pole then, only it wasn't the Hyperborea that we have come to know with Mercator. Byrd's version of the uttermost extreme north involves a hollow earth and the swastika people. That's if we're going by the pages of his supposed lost diary, which was conveniently discovered for us during the dawning hours of the Intelnet. I think probably when the X-Files was on TV. I basically sat here for the last half an hour or so deciding upon whether I should quote from the entire entry or not. It's something like 10 pages long when it's fleshed out. Why waste the paper? I ended up posting it on the website, Unexpected Cosmology, for your reading pleasure, and there's the link there to the Lost Diary. How everything plays out line for line is quite silly. Doesn't make it fiction, though. Frankly, I haven't the faintest clue who wrote it. Perhaps Byrd did, for all I know. Was it purportedly lost but then found next to the typewriter at Langley is another question I have, most likely to discredit the entire idea I'm putting forward. Well, here is the Cliff Notes version of it. Some 3 hours after leaving the runway of his Arctic base camp in February of 1947, he left at 0600 hours, so this is 2 years after World War II comes to a close. Byrd observes how his magnetic and gyro compasses have begun to gyrate and wobble, rendering him handicapped from holding his course through instrumentation. His sun compass will have to do. Within minutes, he spies mountains on the horizon. Within the hour, those mountains produce a green valley with a river running through its center portion. His instruments are still spinning. And then we read the following, quote, this would be 10:05 hours. So 4 hours after he has left. I alter altitude to 1,400 feet. That's pretty low. And execute a sharp left turn to better examine the valley below. It is green with either moss or a type of tight-knit grass. The light here seems different. And it's interesting that in the diary it appears to capitalize light. I don't know if I commented on that. Maybe I did. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below us. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible. Yet, there it is. Decrease altitude to 1,000 feet and take binoculars to better examine the animal. It is confirmed. It is definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. Bird's observation regarding a unique light source without any sun to produce it is a common theme in these hidden wilderness narratives. I'll get into one other. I wish I had time for more because there are others and they all talk about this unique light. This is only the first we've so far looked the first one we've so far looked at, but there will be others. From 1,400 feet, he spots an elephant in review, but no. On closer inspection at 1,000 feet, it is a mammoth, requiring 3 successive exclamation marks in the Admiral's journey, in Admiral's journal. I haven't drunk enough coffee. I'm sorry, guys. The appearance of a mammoth isn't exactly Skull Island material, but it does connect us with the Lost World silhouette of past Masonic adventure writers nonetheless. Continuing at 11:30 hours. Countryside below is more level and normal, if I may use that word. Ahead, we spot what seems to be a city. This is impossible. Aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. My God. Off our port and starboard wings are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It is a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? I tug at the controls again. They will not respond. We are caught in an invisible vice grip of some type. At 11:30 hours, Bird reports the existence of a city surrounded by countryside, thereby demanding 4 exclamation points rather than the 3 reserved for the mammoth. It is, or is it Santa's village or the Camp of Yah or something else? At that precise moment, the engine is cut and his controls refuse to respond. Saucer-shaped aircraft surround him, port and starboard. Imprinted upon them are swastikas. Uh-oh. Must be the Nazis. One can only wonder what their accents sound like. We'll have to keep reading to find out. At 11:35 hours, he says, our radio crackles and a voice comes through in English with what perhaps is a slight Nordic or German accent. The message is, welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral, you are in good hands. And there it is. The people inhabiting Hyperborea have a Nordic accent and German, if there is any doubt, because of, the flying saucers with swastikas on them. Don't tell me the people who guided him in were white with blue eyes and blonde hair, weren't they? I can hardly wait to find out. Skipping an entry or two, and this is what we read. At 11:45 hours, I am making a hasty last entry in the flight log. Several men are approaching on foot toward our aircraft. They are tall with blonde hair. In the distance is a large shimmering city pulsating with rainbow hues of color. I do not know what is going to happen now, but I see no signs of weapons on those approaching. I hear now a voice ordering me by name to open the cargo door. I comply. Exactly. Tall with blonde hair. Were you expecting a basketball team of a different color? They were Nazis, you'll tell me. Is that so? Tell me all about the shimmering rainbow-clad city then. The Third Reich had just lost the war less than 2 years earlier. They were trying to bug out in the bunker. Rainbows make for the worst camouflage ever. Bird's discovery is seriously starting to read more like the landscape of an L. Frank Baum novel than the next Leni Riefenstahl propaganda movie. The swastika sighting manages to lend far more credibility, in my opinion. Not to their being Nazis, though. Quite the opposite, actually. They weren't Nazis. Most people will conclude they were Nazis by association, but that's only because they haven't done their research, though I suspect the bulk of my readership has. Before the Nazi intel operation, swastikas were everywhere, and nobody wearing them were card-carrying members of the party. As if it's not obvious by now, I have included a flapper from the 1920s. Well, you will tell me Hitler designed the Nazi flag in 1920 and that she had the hots for the Führer. Well, then, the photo of the children on the right derives from 1918, 2 years before Hitler's swastika misdirection. But I am only getting started. There are others. And then we see here, we're on page 21. Explain these away, why don't you? Swastikas galore. I never realized hockey was a white supremacy sport, nor that women were so fond of them. They must have been fans of Polaris, the Four Seasons, and all that. Even the origin of basketball is racist, clearly. Pay no attention to the 1908 lineup of Native Americans decked out in swastikas, I guess. The San Francisco YMCA boys basketball team also dates to 1908, and what do you see? So much sinister activity dampening the otherwise good nature of sports. It's a good thing that Hitler exposed them for who they truly are. Haters. You will have to explain this swastika laundry truck while you're at it. Is it a mobile gas chamber? Is that it? I am told we are gazing back upon some random street corner in Dublin, Ireland, in the whereabouts of 1912. Perhaps Hitler simply liked creased pants and an iron shirt, and this is where he drew his inspiration from. I figure swastika laundry was hopping with business for a good decade, starting in 1920, until the script flipped on the Nazi narrative and the swastika became the literal imprint of Satan's butthole on Earth. She had a good run, swastika laundry. Probably couldn't swap the dirty underwear out for the clean fast enough. And then we have this very fashionable lover of minks, friend of fuzzy animals everywhere. She's showing off her new boots when what she should be doing is giving us a tour of the floor. Just look at those tiles. Swastika. Swastika, swastika. I'm counting several of them. They certainly don't make floors like they used to. Oh no. Oh no. What's this? An entire page from the local newspaper devoted to swastikas. Its date of publication is 1917. Swastika jewelry, as if that's not ironic. Swastika cuffs. Swastika necklaces studded with diamonds. A swastika diary. Swastika ribbons, not overlooking the black leather strap engraved with a swastika. This is likely to give someone a vertigo. Nothing kinky about that, I'm sure. And for your next dinner party engagement, why not impress your friends with an entire arsenal of swastika silver spoons? A sale like this probably brought out all the white supremacists in the neighborhood. And then look what it claims about them. You may need to take out your magnifying glass, as I did, but make this easier for you. Here's what it says. To the wearer of swastika will come from the four winds of heaven good luck, long life, and prosperity. The four winds? Well, that's odd. Must be a typo. I think what they meant to say is Third Reich, as in the wearer of the swastika will come from the from Nazi Germany. Well, let's keep reading to see what other misprints there are. Perhaps we can auto-correct them. Continuing, it says, the swastika is the oldest cross and the oldest symbol in the world. Of unknown origin. In frequent use in prehistoric times, it historically first appeared on coins as early as the year 315 BC. The swastika has been discovered on this continent among the ruins of Mexico and Central America, and is at present frequently used by the Indians of the Southwest as an ornament and amulet. Public teachers, you may want to cover the ears of your grade school children so as to keep them pliable to the latest intel reports. It says the swastika is the oldest symbol in the world and was in frequent use during prehistoric times. So much arrogance going on. Among our ancestors, that is. It's a good thing Hitler put a stop to that. And continuing on page 24, the swastika derives from the Sanskrit word svastika, meaning beneficial to well-beings. but it goes by many names and can be found all throughout the ancient world, as we just saw. I have already shown the racist newspaper page, and so I shall give you just a few other examples of those swastika lovers in history, all of whom were waiting around for their beloved Third Reich, apparently. We see it adorning pottery as well as Roman flooring. The Greeks called the symbol tetrakilion, meaning four-legged, though it was known as Philfots in England and Hakenkreuz in Germany. And what do you see among its various forms? The Hopi, Aztec, Greek, and Christians all employed the symbol for one purpose or another, as did the Celts. But wait, did the Jews also dabble in swastika graffiti from time to time? Say it ain't so. What a very drab world this has become with all those recent intel scripts like the Adolf Hitler biography. I'm starting to get the impression that the Kabbalah and the Federal Reserve people have it out for the swastika. It's almost like the Big Dipper's relationship with the North Star has something to do with the equation, and your average flapper 1 century ago knew all about it. The Dipper forms a swastika every 24 hours as the wheel in the sky rotates over the motionless plane, and we can't have that. The luminaries must be shiny, plasma-based supremacists. That or the flat motionless plane is what needs covering. Fun fact, the 4 arms of the swastika are generally represented as the sun, winter, water, and soil, being closely associated with the 4 seasons. According to Hinduism, when the swastika faces to the right, it symbolizes Surya, or the sun, abundance, and good luck. When it faces to the left, it represents the moon, night. Don't get hung up on more misdirection, though. Polaris and the Big Dipper were created by Yahuwah, the Most High Elohim of Yasharel. Together, they spray paint a nightly swastika in the sky, as well as a seasonal one, and they aren't evil. I'm going to take a wild crack at this and claim the ancients, as well as kingdom residents, were well aware of the healing power vibrating from the ether. And besides, Polaris sits directly above the North Pole. It just seems to me that a people situated directly below a swastika in the sky have a right to the symbol. But what do I know? Continuing with the bird diary. That was a bit of a distraction there. My apologies. The swastika people escort the admiral from the tarmac into a city seemingly built of crystals. He is reminded of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings or a Buck Rogers movie, according to his diary. The walls glow from within. They take him down into a hollowed earth. Yada, yada, yada. Somebody commanding from their ranks speaks to him, and this is what he says. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was at that alarming time we sent our flying machines, the Flugelrads, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. That is, of course, past history now, my dear Admiral, but I must continue on. And there it is, folks. That's how we know it's an intel script. Or perhaps a computer nerd is writing fan fiction again, because they're slapping us with atomic fear porn. I see no end to the smoke jug. Little Boy and the Fat Man were hoaxes, the both of them. I don't have time to go over it all again. You'll have to read it here. Atomic bomb hoax. They even managed to insinuate the Roswell crash incident in this one, because sometimes even angels drive while intoxicated. It's nearly the exact same plotline to the day the Earth stood still from this point forward, and the Zionists are its sponsors. Reading on. It happened once before the Dark Ages came, and they lasted for more than 500 years. It should say 1,000 years, but I'll let that pass. Oh, now they're laying it on thick. Straight up vindictive towards the kingdom. The Kabbalah people are. Wouldn't want the Dark Ages to return again. Wink, wink. Jumping ahead several paragraphs, and we read this. March 11th, 1947. I have just attended a staff meeting at the Pentagon. I have stated fully my discovery and the message from the master. Essentially, it says from the master there in capital M, the big master. All is duly recorded. The president has been advised. I am now detained for several hours, 6 hours, 39 minutes to be exact. I am interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team. It was an ordeal. I am placed under strict control via the national security provisions of the United States of America. I am ordered to remain silent in regard to all that I have learned on the behalf of humanity. Incredible. I am often reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders. Byrd is ordered to remain silent by the United States government. FYI, that would include the writing of his diary. Top secret doesn't mean you get to write to Dear Diary at home privately for the conspiracy people to discover and read later on down the line, but we'll let that slide. As a reminder, the people at the pole carried no weapons. They were literally decked out in sunshine and rainbows. Do you think the Pentagon would order Byrd to stand down if they didn't? The military-industrial complex would be there with the UN declaring martial law so as to tax their ass into submission soon as Israel newspapers told them to. This was 1947. Today, there would be rainbow flags of 6 colors rather than 7 on every street corner of Hyperborea. The women would be feminist and the men would be mostly divorced, paying child support, while fat drag queens read to the vaccinated kindergartners fortunate enough not to be sacrificed to Moloch. And every public bathroom would be gender identifiable with kitty litter boxes next to the urinals. No, if Washington was afraid of letting the public know about the people at the pole, it's because they wanted to keep them enslaved to the Zionist bomb narrative. Any advance upon the city would resemble the ending to Raiders of the Lost Ark. The face of every propagandist on the earth would melt. Byrd's diary may be fabricated, but what they're hiding there may not. All right, moving on to page 29 and digging a little deeper back in history. This is called The Blessed Land in St. Brendan. And so what I want to do is go through different accounts of people in history all talking about this hidden wilderness. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to them all. One of them that I wanted to get to came from the book Pearl, the story Pearl, which if you're not familiar with your Arthurian literature, it was discovered, the only copy of Pearl that was ever found was also, I think, in the only copy of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And it's an incredible story, and it makes you think that if for whatever reason our controllers tried to remove Pearl from existence, they seemed pretty successful at it to the fact that only one was discovered in the 1800s. How many other stories were they capable of destroying that maybe gave a lot of hints to this hidden wilderness? So this is called The Blessed Land in St. Brendan. Stories of the hidden wilderness can be found throughout his story, and I aim to track them down. We have already gone over the monk with no name and Mercator as well as Admiral Byrd. Yet another regards Brendan of Clonfert, the Irish monk, and his quest for Terra Repro Missionis Sanctorum, the promised land of the saints. We are told there are over 100 recovered manuscripts of the narrative distributed throughout Europe and in multiple languages, telling us that it was at one time the popular literature of its day, especially if it was in multiple languages. They were apparently recorded in the whereabouts of 900 AD, though Brendan himself supposedly lived between 484 and 577. 400 years is a long time for any generations of people. Why wait that long to record the journey? That's just a side note. Brandon's story begins when he meets fellow explorer Saint Barinthus, whom many traditions claim was a disciple of his anyways. Barinthus was successful in witnessing the undying lands with his own eyes. It is a large island in the Western Sea, Barinthus relates, which Yah had originally intended for mankind to inhabit. There it is always day. That's key. It is always day there. Its plants continually bloom and bear fruits at once. Its stones are gems. Its visitors, though I suppose you could say its intended inhabitants, need neither food, drink, nor sleep. That sounds very familiar to what we've been looking at. And after Barinthus describes his own successful round-trip journey to the island, and specifically that its expected inhabitants are those who had embraced the faith during their mortal life, Brendan compiles a group of 14 other monks and sets out on his way. Though in many versions, an angel commands Brendan to undertake the voyage because Brendan does not believe in the existence of the land of promise. He has even gone so far as to burn a book reporting upon it, and isn't that interesting? Lots of book burnings going on regarding the greater realm, but I'm sure that's all happenstances. After a long trying voyage, this is what we read. They took with them provisions for 40 days, as their course lay to the west for that space of time, during which the procurator went on before them, guiding their way. At the end of 40 days, towards evening, a dense cloud overshadowed them, so dark that they could scarce see one another. Then the procurator said to St. Brendan, "Do you know, Father, what darkness is this?" And the saint replied that he knew not. "This darkness," he said, "surrounds the island you have sought for 7 years. You will soon see that it is the entrance to it." And after an hour had elapsed, a great light shone around them, and the boat stood by the shore. Just so you know, I skipped a great deal of the narrative to arrive at this point. The 40 days being referred to is the end of the voyage, not the entirety of it. I can't even talk tonight. You have to keep reading. It says he sought out the island for the matter of 7 years. That was from when he left Ireland. So, long voyage. For comparison, the official narrative has the westward voyage of Christopher Columbus to America lasting an unimpressive 36 days, not 7 years. And as you can see, darkness surrounds the hidden wilderness, another character trait of the Lost World narrative. What it more than likely tells us is that Brandon had reached the outermost extremities of our realm, well beyond the circuit of the sun. Well, continuing. When they had disembarked, they saw a land extensive and thickly set with trees, laden with fruits, as in the autumn season. All the time they were traversing that land, and during their stay in it, no night was there, but a light always shone, like the lights of the sun in the meridian. And for the 40 days they viewed the land in various directions, they could not find the limits thereof. Despite a perpetual darkness that surrounds the hidden wilderness, the light always shines there. What does that remind you of? The writer of Bird's Diary experienced the same phenomena. But then Scripture has something to say on the matter of light, and the sun isn't always it. There was light upon the earth before the sun was created. I obviously don't need to tell you that Yahusha is that light. If you don't believe me, then I'll let you do your own study on the topic. Quickly, though, here is a passage which speaks from the opposite perspective. What is the opposite of Brendan discovering light without the sun? You're about to find out. This comes from 1 Adam and Eve, chapter 16, verse 3. Then Adam began to come out of the cave, and when he came to the mouth of it, and stood and turned his face toward the east, and saw the sun rise in glowing rays, and felt the heat thereof on his body, he was afraid of it, and thought in his heart that this flame came forth to plague him. On his first morning upon the earth, after being expelled from paradise, Adam witnessed the sun rising in the east and was terrified of the light emanating from it. Up to that point in time, all he had ever experienced was the light of Hamashiach. One other passage worth noting derives from Revelation. You probably already know where I'm going with this, but entertain me anyways. So here we go. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of Elohim gives its light, and the Lamb is its lamp. Revelation 21:23. Remember your training and what you have learned leading up to this point, particularly as it pertains to 2 Ezra 7:26. When New Jerusalem appears, the hidden wilderness will be disclosed as well. There is a direct correlation between the two, as well as their total lack of dependence upon the sun and the firmament for the outsourcing of light. So continuing with the Brendan account, this is what we read. One day, however, they came to a large river flowing towards the middle of the land, which they could not by any means cross over. St. Brendan then said to the brethren, "We cannot cross over this river, and we must therefore remain ignorant of the size of this country." While they were considering this matter, a young man of resplendent features and very handsome aspect came to them, and joyfully embracing and addressing each of them by his own name, said, "Peace be with you, brothers, and with all who practice the peace of Christ. Blessed are they who dwell in thy house, O Adonai. They shall praise thee forever and ever." How many miles do you suppose Brendan and company explored before reaching the river? The river was uncrossable, rendering him ignorant as to the total size of the country. A seasoned explorer can manage 20 miles in a day. Brendan had already traveled over 40 days up to that point. Assuming he had already budgeted 5 Sabbath day rests in that time period, we're still looking at something like 700 miles, potentially. I suspect the delectable nature of the land slowed him down considerably, or maybe not. Maybe it made him walk faster. For comparison, though, that's nearly the distance from North America's east coast to the Mississippi River. And actually, that has been pointed out in this account as well as in Pearl. It was the same thing. And they traveled for a long time, and there was a big river that he was not able to cross, and he had to turn around at that point. Speaking of which, the river itself is a repeated theme in these wilderness narratives, as I just pointed out. We shall discover it again in other accounts. Sadly, we won't, because I didn't get around to it. And I actually say that right here, if I ever get around to them. On close inspection, it's not simply the river which forbids Brendan from venturing any further. The young person standing there plays a part of equal importance, if not greater. It is he who ultimately detours them. Otherwise, you figure Brendan and company might venture up and down the water seeking a practical crossing point, as any determined explorer would. The reason being is important. The immortal inhabitants of that realm most likely live beyond the river. Continuing. So this man standing on the other side of the river, he then said to St. Brendan, "This is the land you have sought after for so long a time, but you could not hitherto find it, because Christ our Lord wished first to display to you his diverse mysteries in the immense ocean." That's kind of interesting. "Return now to the land of your birth, bearing with you as much of those fruits and of those precious stones as your boat can carry, for the days of your earthly pilgrimage must draw to a close, when you may rest in peace among your saintly brethren. After many years, this land will be made manifest to those who come after you, when days of tribulation may come upon the people of Christ. The great rivers you see here divides this land into two parts, and just as it appears now teeming with ripe fruits, so does it ever remain, without any blights or shadow whatever, for light unfailing shines thereon." When St. Brendan inquired whether this land would be revealed unto men, the young man replied, "When the Most High Creator will have brought all nations under subjugation, then will this land be made known to all his elect." Soon after, St. Brendan, having received the blessing of this man, prepared for his return to his own country. He gathered some of the fruits of the land and various kinds of precious stones, and having taken a last farewell of the good procurator who had each year provided food for him and his brethren, he embarked once more and sailed back through the darkness again. And that's how he explains he was able to travel for 7 years. He had a heavenly kind of guide who was feeding him so that he could reach it that far, because no man could ever sail to make it that far otherwise. That just about sums it up. The disclosure of the hidden wilderness in Brendan's account manages to complement what we have already read, mostly. When stating that the land would be revealed unto men when the Most High Creator brings all nations under his subjection, that's a reference to the millennial kingdom. We are already well beyond that point in his story, though, so that's weird. That's weird how that cut over. So why is it not disclosed then? I have already explained that part. Obviously, it was disclosed. It was disclosed until it wasn't. And then it will be again with New Jerusalem. Yahuwah's elect knew all about the hidden wilderness and traveled there, but it was never a land intended for sinners. The young man speaking to Brendan even says as much, that it would only be made known to his elect. That is 100% correct. New Jerusalem isn't getting revealed from heaven until all the sinners are eliminated from the earth. Those who refuse the truth will receive none of it. All right, continuing on with the next section. This is kind of fun. This is going to get fun tonight. The Undying Lands and Middle Earth. The Elves had a method by which they were capable of reaching the Undying Lands, and in the Lord of the Rings cinematic trilogy, Peter Jackson never got around to telling you how they did it, but I will. Before I do, though, you should know that I watched The Lord of the Rings of Power on Amazon the other day. I am sad to report that they didn't either. In both productions, elves were depicted en route to the Undying Lands. I would very much like to know how to get there. You'd think something like that would be important. And yes, I do believe the Undying Lands of Middle Earth is the very hidden wilderness which we have been talking about. And so here is what nobody seems willing to tell you. This is an article in Wikipedia. We see the Flat Earth Cosmology, ARDA, and it says, well, I'll explain it. Let's go on page 36. The world of J.R.R. Tolkien was flat. It says the disc-like Earth had continents and seas, and that the sun, moon, and stars revolve around it. Oh, gee, I wonder why Hollywoodland is silent on the issue. Tolkien was totally in the know. I very much wish I could time travel just to ask him if water always found its level in Middle Earth too. Apparently, the lack of gravity wasn't an issue, nor are there any accounts of people sailing off the edge that I know of. And believe it or not, I have just solved the riddle as to how one reaches the Undying Lands. One can do so, but only if they recognize the Earth is flat. Because the Undying Lands do not exist upon a globe, you see. Knowing that is half the battle. All indications would have me conclude you have to go beyond the pole to arrive there. Somebody is already writing the rebuttal to explain how I would pop out on the other side of the Earth if such an endeavor were attempted. This is undoubtedly where your globe Earth indoctrination will do its work. I will once again remind you that the wilderness is hidden from our maps. Even the AE projection map doesn't dare venture beyond what Mercator allowed for. Therefore, I am thinking you will need to unlearn what you have learned, should one hope to locate its coordinates on an elven ship. So let's keep reading. There, you can read there, Tolkien's Legendarium addresses the spherical Earth paradigm by depicting a catastrophic transition from a flat to a spherical world in which Amon, that's the name of the Undying Lands, the continent where Valinor lay, was removed, quote, from the circles of the world, unquote. The only remaining way to reach Amon, the Undying Land, was the so-called Straight Road. Isn't that interesting? A hidden route leaving Middle-Earth's curvature through sky and space, which was exclusively known and open to the elves, who were able to navigate it with their ships. Sounds like an awesome trip. At some point in Middle-Earth history, Tolkien depicted a catastrophic event which had the world transformed from a flat to a spherical realm. Lame. It is that episode which has the island of Numenor sink into the sea, if you know your lore. That's if you recall, for those of you who kind of loosely saw the original trilogy, that's Aragorn was like the last descendants, the king lineage from Numenor. Still lame, though, on an exoteric level. Yahuwah Elohim did not create a flat, motionless realm, only to change his mind so as to prove the Kabbalah people right. On an esoteric level, however, it's brilliant and makes all the sense in the world. Keep reading. It says the Undying Land was removed from the circles of the world. Amon could still be reached, but only upon the so-called Straight Road, a, quote, hidden route leaving Middle-Earth's curvature, unquote, through sky and space. So that is what NASA is doing with their rocket ships. The way they arch into the sky and land in the water again, just beyond the horizon. They've taken the straight road. Brilliance, I tell you. And here's an illustration you can actually see on the Wikipedia, which again I think is brilliance. I mean, this is, in my opinion, telling you, it's giving it away. The Wikipedia is kind enough to include an illustration detailing precisely how our controllers hide the land from us. As you can see, Amon exists on a flat Earth map, but not on a globe. It takes the elves to land there via the straight road. Wink, wink. If you need this spelled out for you, 71% of the planet's surface is water, according to official estimates. Even going according to the standard AE flat Earth map, the surface of water would be a much greater percentage than that, particularly in the southern hemisphere, where NASA controls all international flight paths and direct flights are not allowed, though the continents appear somewhat near on a globe. They could be hiding all sorts of places there, given the extra padding, and we'll see a little bit later on what they are hiding there. The other notable mention is that the elves of Middle-earth are the ones with access to the Undying Lands, and they just so happen to come across as the resurrected sainthood of the Millennial Kingdom. Some of us have been holding discussions on the comparisons as of late. Unlike men, the elves are immortal beings, simultaneously maintaining both a spiritual and physical duality in the world they inhabit. By no coincidence do the elves see themselves as the guardians of the realm. Their very existence promises to create a perimeter around the gushing tidewaters of evil, particularly the long-promised return of the villain in the series, Sauron. And it seems as though many mortal men despise them for it. And as we, see the elves leaving on the straight road, we see evil taking over the world. Although it is true that they can physically die in Middle-earth, all that means is that their arrival is secured within the halls of Mandos and Valinor. And again, I will remind you, Valinor is the Undying Lands. Glorfindel, if I'm pronouncing his name right, is one such example of an elf who died in a battle with a Balrog and then arrived at the halls of Mandos only to be deemed worthy of returning to Middle-earth again in both spirit and flesh. Thank you, Josh, for that information. And if you guys don't know what the Balrog is, if you recall the first Lord of the Rings movie, it looked like that shampoo commercial where Gandalf's like that, you shall not pass. And it's like he's like flakes or something, like dried hair or whatever. And anyways, very few know of his story, Glorfindel, but he can be seen standing next to Elrond at the closure of Peter Jackson's Return of the King. Afterwards, Glorfindel sailed with Gandalf, Bilbo, Galadriel, and Frodo and company to the Undying Lands once and for all. It is with the final parting of the elves via the straight road that give way to the world of mortal men. And I point all this out just to show that it's really interesting that the lore of Tolkien between the Undying Lands and the people who sail there, who are immortal beings that are very different than mortal men, because they have a spiritual and a physical duality at the same time, and you can't really kill them off. You can physically kill them, but they can maybe physically come back because they're immortal. So it's just really, really interesting. All right, page 39, if you need caught up, the moon map, because some of you were waiting for this moment. Here it is. Starting out on page 1 of this discussion, I slipped in a picture of the moon, wondering which of my readers had already done their homework and knew precisely where this is all headed. The hidden wilderness very likely can be found on a map, a very old map for sure. I guess you could even say an outdated map, seeing as how Atlantis and other landmarks are still present and accounted for, but a map nonetheless. I'm showing it again so as to refresh your memory. The map of our greater realm, in case you haven't caught on yet, is the moon. I was fortunate enough to learn the trade of photography in an actual darkroom before this present digital revolution, and therefore know precisely what's going on here. You're looking at a negative image of the moon. If you did happen to miss out on the 90s or any decade prior and can't recall the excitement of picking up your envelopes of 24 to 36 Kodak photos at the local shopping mall's 1-hour development lab, and not knowing which were of last year's family vacation or of grandma blowing out her birthday candles, then allow me to explain. In photography, negatives are the images imprinted on long plastic strips. They're the actual rolls of film that are unwound from the film canister after having been loaded within the belly of the camera. Each negative is transparent. You have to hold them up to the light in order to see the image within, but everything is reversed. The lightest areas appear darkest, whereas the darkest areas appear lightest. If you are a white person, then your skin would be black and the pupils of your eyes white. This reversed order occurs because the extremely light-sensitive chemicals a camera film must use to capture an image quickly enough are darkened, rather than bleached, by exposure to various degrees of light. In the case of color negatives, the colors are also reversed into their respective complementary colors. The irony here is that the negative I showed you regarding the moon isn't its true negative. No, it should be the positive. The light areas of the quote-unquote negative denote land, where the dark areas constitute water. Contrarily, what you're staring at in any given night sky is its negative. Do you know what else can only be viewed as a negative image? I've already given away the answer. The Shroud of Turin is a negative. One must wonder if they were created in a similar fashion. None of this will make any sense if you're still hung up on the moon being a huge hunk of rock held in place by a gravitational pole in an ever-expanding vacuum of space, complete with an American flag and Neil Armstrong's boot print, LOL. The moon is a focused electromagnetic phenomenon called plasma. Another way of stating the obvious is that we live in an electrical realm. Cosmic electromagnetic energy is passed back and forth between the flat motionless plane below and the firmament above via the ether. The inner reflection of this electromagnetic energy on our ceiling turns it back down, creating a focus spot point. At this spot, there is an observable fluorescence of the ether because of the focused cosmic electromagnetic energy. The spot that is created is the moon. That was wordy, wasn't it? Good roadside directions are hard to come by. So let's see if I can break this down in simpler language. Starting again. To better understand the moon, we likely need to venture back to our magnetic north, Hyperborea. It is there where we can expect to find a magnetic rock, the heart's desire of our every compass. The ancients spoke of a whirlpool. Let's go with that and assume it is the location of the abyss. In the abyss, we shouldn't be surprised to discover a magnetic coil. Seems logical. Really, it's not like we're talking about some decorative barbershop pole on a floating iceberg. Any form of an intense electromagnetism, particularly what we see with all compasses all across the world, would naturally produce strong radiation. It is quite possible that our plasma moon is the result of that radiation, but in the form of an X-ray. X-rays are a penetrating form of high-energy electromagnetic radiation. Like so many other advances in modern science, X radiation was quote-unquote discovered in the post-mud flood era by our controllers, 1895 to be exact. In this scenario, however, the X-ray is emanating from a vortex in the center of our realm, rising upwards towards the ether in divergent, though invisible lines. Those beams continue until coming into contact with the firmament itself. The beams of an X-ray differ from light beams in that they do not reflect off mirrors the same way that visible light does. Because of their high energy, X-ray photons that strike a mirror directly will penetrate into the mirror in much the same way that bullets aimed directly at a surface will bury themselves in it. X-rays are a kind of super powerful version of ordinary light, a higher energy form of electromagnetic radiation that travel at the speed of light in straight lines just like light waves do. But because their wavelengths are shorter than that of ordinary light, it means their frequency is much higher. Because of this, an X-ray can travel through objects that ordinary light cannot. Still following? There are not many materials that can reflect or scatter the beams of an X-ray. Turns out, crystalline structures do. It would take Pink Floyd, or scratch that, William H. Bragg, an Australian-born British physicist and X-ray crystallographer, to make that fact known in 1912 via Bragg's law of X-ray diffraction. And what is crystalline but the firmament? There is much to be discovered, but what seems apparent is that the firmament and our perception of the moon are in direct relationship with the other. Fun fact, Bragg was the director of the Cavendish Laboratory, Cambridge, when the discovery of the double helix DNA structure was reported by Watson and Crick in 1953, which I went over a few weeks ago. I made that joke about Pink Floyd several lines ago, but was it really? Their most popular album cover depicts Bragg's crystalline light as viewed through a monochromator, and yet it is called the dark side of the moon. Truth in plain sight is more like it. A monochromator, in case you were wondering, is an optical device that transmits a mechanically selectable narrow band of wavelengths of light or other radiation chosen from a wider range of wavelengths available at the input. Wordy, I know. I lifted that definition from Wiki. You can see it there. File a complaint with their department. Point is that a reflecting monochromator uses a single prism to redirect light. I have added a photo so that you can see how an X-ray beam would do just that in such an optical device. The redirected beams of an X-ray in the crystalline firmament probably explains what we are looking at in the moon and why it is a composite image. Multiple pictures laid over the other. There are at least two fixed images that I can see. The most obvious is the skeletal landmasses as seen from the perspective of an X-ray. You may have already noticed that the map is flipped from how we would naturally perceive it on any given full moon. That's because it is first and foremost a reflection, a mirror image of the continents below. The second image is of the firmament. The two images, when superimposed upon the other, depict a precise moment in time in a pre-Diluvian world. You will recall that the firmament was formed on the second day of creation to separate the waters above from the waters below. The waters below from the waters above. The land rose above the waters on the third day, and the moon was created on the fourth. My best guess is that the land masses as well as the firmament were captured and imprinted upon the moon at that precise moment, probably when the moon was created. We are seeing the signature of Yahuwah Elohim during the creation week. Undoubtedly, the firmament skeleton is captured from a different angle than the land masses. We are told the belly button, for example, is a crater called Tycho, when in fact it represents the vortex at the highest point of the dome, the firmament, the very center of our realm. You can actually see the rays stemming out from it like hemispherical ribs. Stop and think about it. The moon is the only known image of the firmament that we know of. It's the firmament which gives the moon its spherical appearance. Tycho was named in 1651 in honor of the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe, or maybe it's just Bra, by somebody named Giovanni Riccioli. I checked. Riccioli was a Jesuit. Another astronomer to name the crater was Frenchman Pierre Gassendi. He called it Umbilicus Lunaris, which literally translates to the navel of the moon. How adorable. Arthur C. Clarke chose Tycho in his novel 2001: A Space Odyssey to describe a strong magnetic field emanating from the crater. It is in Tycho where they discovered a black cube monolith, the source of the big field. Again, adorable. In 1965, some 4 shallow years before the Apollo moon landing hoax, the elite drug American astrophysical professor Amon R. Foster before the media to deliver the truth on the matter, but then debunk it in the process. I dropped a link to his interview. Here is another, and since I am in a good mood, yet another. After the interviewer asked Professor Foster to explain his theory, here is his response. And quickly, I don't necessarily think that Foster is a shill or anything like that. I think he's genuine. I see no reason why not to. I think that he was a legitimate guy who believed this, and he didn't realize that the only reason they're dragging him out is to defeat him. He maybe was a bit gullible and really thought that he would be proven correct. He maybe never imagined that he thought, oh, I'm getting the spotlight. People are going to see the truth. And he vanished and went away. We never hear from him again. It is rather more than a theory, he says. 10 or 11 years ago, I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a rock, but it is plasma, a plasma phenomena, cosmic plasma, and that this fact will eventually be confirmed. I made certain predictions which were already confirmed in 1958, and the situation now is coming close to a complete confirmation. Oh, really? The interviewer then asked Foster what the results of this theory will be if he is proved correct, in which Foster says, the results will be profound and decisive because it will give proof as a complete reinvestigation of the laws of nature is necessary. Because if the moon is a plasma, no man will ever land on it. Self-landing attempts will all fail. Well, that turned out exactly as Foster predicted. The Apollo 8 astronauts orbited the moon in 1968 and were like, we were wrong, and Professor Foster was totally legit all along. The moon is made of plasma. Guess we can't land on it. Continuing. That means that the mass of the moon is far less than is currently assumed. It's in a different state of energy, and it has far less mass. That means there is no more explanation for the tides. If the moon, for example, had only 1,000 part of its current mass, then the tides would only be 2 inches high. And that means that if it is proof that the moon is a plasma, then all gravitational theories are out, and the new concept of the cosmos and of its laws has to be evolved. What Foster appears to be saying is that the space race was misdirection, when in fact everything we know about the laws of science as well as the greater realm is wrong, and our controllers can't have that. Best to debunk him with the hoax. Foster wasn't the only one, though. In 1964, 1 year earlier, Joseph A. Bodnar, a graduate mechanical draftsman and a pioneer in the X-ray field, was interviewed by the media for his dedicated research to the idea that the moon was a reflection of the Earth, only to be defeated by Buzz in the game. Again, I think this guy might have been totally legit, and I think that our controllers found a guy who found out the truth and decided to drag him out for the media and just to make him look stupid. He claimed the same thing I'm saying. Water shows white, whereas the land is black, thereby indicating there is much more land out there than we are being told. Flat Earthist Samuel Shinton was drug out for the masturbatory ridicule of the media for an entire decade for the same purposes. You read this guy's biography, it's tragic how this guy was just belittled by the press for like 12 years. Whether or not any of these mentioned individuals were shills is secondary to the reality that our controllers chose their research for an explicit purpose. Why our controllers would go to such great lengths to perpetrate a flamboyantly royal hoax can best be explained in the ideas they are attempting to silence. The Earth is a flat, motionless plane, and indeed, the plasma moon is a map of the greater realm. Also, Bodnar shared his reasons as to why he wanted to wake his fellow Americans up to the moon mirror reality. In his words, to save the taxpayers from 5 to 20 billions of dollars NASA says it would need for the Apollo moon landings. And this is in 1964. Bodnar threatened to pinch the pockets of our pimps and handlers. And again, they can't have that. Foster, Bodnar, Shenton, and others, whom I haven't taken the time to mention, were simply carted out for 5 minutes to show us what the ancients knew perfectly well to be true. A map of our realm could be located within the firmaments, and I have found one such example to prove it. This comes from Yasher, or the book of Jasher, chapter 53:20. And Benjamin beheld that instrument with the map of the stars of heaven, and he was wise and looked therein to know where his brother was. And Benjamin divided the whole land of Mitzrayim into 4 divisions, and he found that he who was sitting upon the throne before him was his brother Joseph. And Benjamin wondered greatly, and when Joseph saw that his brother Benjamin was so much astonished, he said unto Benjamin, "What hast thou seen, and why art thou astonished?" Now, to give you context on this, Benjamin, Joseph's brothers, his 11 brothers, all thought he was sold. Well, he was sold into slavery. They didn't know where he was. They didn't know if he was alive or dead. Their father, Yaakov, their father Yaakov thought he was murdered because, the coat of many colors with the blood. And they're standing in the same room as Joseph. And Benjamin is able to look up to the heavens, to the firmament, to the stars, and map out where his brother was and go, guys, he's standing in the same room as us. It doesn't outright say the moon is a map, nor are we told what the instrument is which he beheld to track down the whereabouts of his brother Joseph. But Benjamin's sleuth skills are nonetheless impressive. No, they were seated at the same table, both brothers. Benjamin hadn't the faintest clue that the Egyptian was his brother until he gazed up at the night sky and tracked his coordinates to the very room he was standing in, no less. In explaining all of this, Benjamin is declared to be wise. Even in ancient times, very few people were wise, meaning that not everyone was capable of reading the skies like GPS. The wise men who searched out Messiah come to mind, though. They did the same thing. They searched out the skies and found out precisely where he was. Perhaps it is true that only some of the ancients could comb the heavens, but none of them believed the earth was a globe. And so there you have it, the moon map, our greater realm. You thought I was making this up, didn't you? You were waiting around taking bets, seeing if I'd really go through with it, weren't you? Just look at that beauty. The straight road of the Elves should make perfect sense by this point. You have to sail beyond the curve to reach the flat world of old. I spy far too much land to fit on any one decorative globe they sell at Target. If you're already confused, don't be. I will be your tour guide. Our portion of the realm is located within the circular red lines on the right, denoting the circuit of the sun and the moon. A closer look will be given on the next page. Nearly everything outside of those lines makes up the potential landmasses for the hidden wilderness. Quite the hunk of land, too. It's probably difficult to read, but the name of the largest continent, according to this map, is Terra Vista. You could fit North and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Antarctica in it and still have room to stretch out. And so you can look at all the various pictures here, close-ups of our realm, our side of the moon map, and it's absolutely incredible. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 49. Credit is due to Vibes of Cosmos. So there's a shout out to him. There's a link to his channel. He did the backbreaking work on this, not me. I'm just the courier. And so now that you have received the package, I'll give you a minute to comb through the stunning details of our realm as depicted on the moon. I spy Russia, Japan, Morocco, Madagascar, Spain, the UK, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The existence of Hyperborea, precisely as Mercator envisioned it, has me excited. How in the world any of this can be explained by sheer coincidences beyond me? It's all there and more. The Red Sea is perfectly where it ought to be. Even the Black Sea is accounted for. The lost continent of Lemuria is positioned east of Australia and India, precisely where it was hypothesized to be by our post-mud flood inheritors, Philip Sclater and Helena Blavatsky. Blavatsky particularly declared its citizens to be of the third root race, a subpar spiritual progeny, but who built a civilization which far excelled anything dreamt up by the Egyptians or the Greeks, and that it was ultimately destroyed in a great deluge. Science has supposedly disproven the ancient knowledge put forward by those in the know, because Lemuria is a myth, you see, but the skies say otherwise. In a little while, I will show you the sleight of hand. Lemuria still exists. And then on page 50, and this, of course, now is kind of showing the other side of the realm. Before I get carried away with the particulars of our known realm, I probably need to remind you that the purpose of this paper is to talk about the hidden wilderness, the land beyond the reaches of the sun and the moon. On this map, we know it as Terra Vista. Residents of the hidden wilderness undoubtedly refer to it by another name, but seeing as how Terra Vista essentially means land with a pleasant view, I won't argue. Let's go with it. Some have claimed the unseen land is a wasteland of darkness and ice, of chaos and the void, and therefore uninhabitable. Such a place is even recorded in Enoch, wherein we read the following: I saw every large river until I arrived at the great darkness. I went to where all of flesh migrate, and I beheld the mountains of the gloom which constitutes winter, and the place from which issues the water in every abyss. I saw also the mouths of all the rivers in the world and the mouths of the deep. Enoch 17, 5-6, depending on which book of Enoch you read, it might be 16 or 18. Enoch testifies to a mountainous land of endless gloom and winter. But then look at what it is in connection with the place where all flesh ends up. He is inferring to a migration of souls, the entryway to Sheol. Another hint is given when he notes the place from which issues the water in every abyss. I am more inclined to conclude he is speaking of Hyperborea, the location of our magnetic north. In any ways, the gloom of winter is certainly true of other portions beyond our own. I will get to that in a little while. But first, I will remind you again of the accounts given to us regarding light of a different nature. That lines up with what can be read in the very first chapter of our Bibles. The light was flipped on the first day of the creation week, though the sun wouldn't show up for another few days. You probably already know where I'm going with this. I have learned, however, never to assume. And so here you go. Reading from Yochanan 1:1-5, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and Elohim was the Word. The same was in the beginning with Elohim. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. But then we see over in Revelation 21:23, which, we already read this earlier, but repeating it again. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of Elohim did light in it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. Yahushua HaMashiach was the light at the beginning. On those first few days, some will claim Yochanan is speaking merely of an esoteric light, an inward spark, if you will. That may be so, but Yochanan has so much more on his mind. Revelation helps to clear things up, and why I dropped both passages side by side. It's in New Yerushalayim where we come to learn that the Lamb is the electrical wiring for the entire establishment. Not to say that the sun and the moon are done away with. They're simply no longer required. You will tell me my theory is bonk if the context is New Yerushalayim and the city hasn't come down yet. No, it isn't. Just because the Lamb is the light inside the city doesn't mean he ceases to be a light outside of the city. Where Yahusha goes, so goes the lamp. And then look at what we read in the Legends of the Jews. I found this fascinating. The light created at the very beginning is not the same as the light emitted by the sun, the moon, and the stars, which appeared only on the fourth day. The light of the first day was of a sort that would have enabled enabled man to see the world at a glance from one end to the other. Anticipating the wickedness of the sinful generations of the deluge and the Tower of Babel, who were unworthy to enjoy the blessing of such light, Elohim concealed it. But in the world to come, it will appear to the pious in all its pristine glory. So the light of creation was the sort of quality which enabled men to see the world at a glance from one end to the other. No more atmospheric lensing. You could stand on the shoreline of California and wave a "good day, mate" to someone in Australia. It's all rather awkward if the Earth was a globe, seeing as how there's apparently a curve just beyond the horizon. Must have had eyes that matched those elven ships if they were expected to see from one end to the other. Wink, wink. Meaning that the view from Terra Vista today must be spectacular indeed, because look at what else we read. In the world to come, the light of creation will appear to the pious in all its pristine glory. Not to the impious, though, just the pious. No wonder why the hidden wilderness won't be revealed until the sinners are snuffed out into the darkness of their design. When the light of the Lamb finally makes itself known, the hidden wilderness will be revealed in so much as the righteous will be able to wave shalom to the residents of Terra Vista from wherever they find themselves on the moon map. And continuing to page 53, mini Antarcticas. I can't believe that we're almost 2 hours into this, and I still have 2 or 3 more passages to read. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. In reply to the individual requesting some years ago that I write a paper on Antarctica's location in the flat Earth realm, and this is for you. I have finally gotten around to it, but sadly not before the second decade of the 20th century came to an end. Seriously, somebody asked me to describe what Antarctica looks like on a flat Earth map back in 2017, and I told that person I would get to it. I'm just now getting to it. I've got a stack of papers this high, people. Back then, I would have shown a picture of the AE projection map, particularly the proposed outer ring of the world, and then called it a day. Maryland knew. For obvious reasons, the situation regarding our greater realm has changed Antarctica's identity, but only slightly. Some of you are thinking there can't possibly be an Antarctic ring around the realm if the moon map is true. The moon map is totally legit, and they're both correct. I'll do my best to show you why. The ring still exists because the firmament exists. It's simply larger than we suspected. Others are adamant that the AE map was invented by our controllers. That may be. Most likely because it is their portion of the realm. They control it. The dragon swept a third of the stars from heaven in Revelation 12:4 and flung them to the earth. What is 1/3 but 33? Oh dear. The beginning rank of any true Freemason is 33. And so if I had to take a wild guess, I would say the AE map makes up 33% of the greater realm. There is that magic number again. It's a shot in the dark, but I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if that turns out to be true. In edits, I found this after finishing this paper. It is true. All of it. My thoughts about our entire known realm being only 33% of the greater whole. I scrambled upon the following passage a few minutes ago. This comes from the Legends of the Jews, Volume 1. It takes 500 years to walk from the earth to the heavens and from one end of the heaven to the other. And this is in context talking about the 7 firmaments of heaven. And also from one heaven to the next. And it takes the same length of time to travel from the east to the west or from the south to the north. And then get this right here. Of all this vast world, let's talk about this vast world, only 1/3 is in Feel free to exchange glances between Obama and Maryland. Take all the time you need. The UN logo includes a laurel wreath rather than the Antarctic ring. And isn't that interesting? The laurel wreath is an ancient symbol denoting victory and conquest, peace and safety through totalitarian rule, that sort of thing. Visions of Caesar are easily conjured, or perhaps the Olympic Games. One can envision light bearers carrying the torch of illumination all over the world before the opening ceremony begins, after which the laurel wreath is handed out as a crown to its victors. And you never guess who originally wore the laurel wreath. Well, I checked. It was Apollo. You will tell me Marilyn was simply a fan of United Nations speeches and also of measuring flight paths in her spare time. Marilyn must have been a fan of the World Health Organization then. That's probably it. I invite you to pay careful attention to the WH logo because they were not simply content with a laurel wreath surrounding their... No, they decided to show us the method by which the world would be conquered, and that is with the staff of Hermes, complete with the coiling serpent. Alchemy. If you obstinately tell me that there is no connection whatsoever between Apollo and Hermes and a worship of the serpent as well as pharmaceuticals, then you are once again letting cognitive dissonance win the day. Please stop doing that. Can you hear it? Listen closely. Somebody's whispering in the wind. The earth is flat. It seems like just about everybody but the gullible public are well aware of that fact. Really come to think of it, a laurel wreath circle on the surface of the waters at the boundary of light and darkness. I have come prepared with several passages in scripture which describe the edge of the greater Rome. This is just one of them. And as you can see, Yahuwah has inscribed the surface of the waters with a circle, which furthermore denotes the boundary between light and darkness. Several years ago, I would have mistaken the laurel wreath and Antarctica as the circular ring of our world, in part because the revolution of the sun and the moon form a circuit within it. The Antarctica part is partially correct, but certainly not the greater Rome as seen on the moon map. We've been over that already. Give me more time and I will show you how the Antarctica deception works. Continuing with without interruption. We read this from Proverbs 8:27. It says, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he inscribed a circle on the face of the deep. When he set the clouds above. When he made the fountains of the deep strong. When he gave to the sea its law, so that the waters would not transgress his mouth. When he inscribed the foundations of the earth. Reading on. This comes from Job 38, 8 through 11. Or who enclosed the sea with doors when it burst forth and came from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and assigned for it my law, and set bars and doors, and said, this far you have come, but no farther, and here your proud waves stop. Reading on. This comes from Ecclesiastes 1:7 from the Targum. This is actually really interesting. All the rivers and streams of water go and flow into the waters of the ocean, which surround the world like a ring. And the ocean is not full, and to the place where the streams go and flow, there they go again through the channels of the sea. Reading on. This one comes from, Second Enoch. I always get excited when I get to throw Second Enoch in there. And then I made firm the heavenly circle, and I made that the lower water, which is under heaven, collect itself together into one whole, and that the chaos becomes dry, and it became so. Out of the waves, I created rock hard and big, and from the rock I upheld up the dry, and the dry I called earth, and the midst of the earth I called abyss. So there's the midst of the earth, the Hyperborea, the abyss, right there. And that's where, I believe that the moon was, the image on the moon was perhaps created from the magnetic energy there. That is to say, the bottomless, I collected the sea in one place and bound it together with a yoke. And I said to the sea, behold, I give you your eternal limits, and you shall not break loose from your component parts. Thus I made fast the firmament. This day I called me the first created. It is only appropriate that my search for the outer ring took me far and wide within the pages of Scripture. How fun that Second Enoch, as well as the Ecclesiastes Targum, is represented in the quest. By all accounts, the earth takes on the shape of a circle or a ring. There are limits, but we never once read that Antarctica is it. Ecclesiastes 1:7 simply says the oceans surround the world without ever mentioning an ice wall. Passages such as that one might lead some to conclude that person would sail right off, but then look at how Second Enoch describes the situation. There is a heavenly circle defined by eternal limits. That's the firmament being insinuated. It is the firmament ensuring that the waters are properly compassed about. The way I imagine this is very much like the ending to the Truman Show. Somebody sails towards the horizon until they thump right into it, should they even be capable of making it that far. Captain Cook is said to have made a 6,000-mile journey around the Antarctic Circle in 1772. An interesting number, seeing as how 6,000 years is the timeline that we're expected to go with, and the Masoretic rather than the 7,000 in the LXX. Technically, Cook never saw Antarctica. Nobody did until after the mud flood event, or rather, the Napoleonic Wars. I say this because there's no possible way that Antarctica was unknown before Fabian Billingshausen of Russia, or Edward Bransfield and William Smith of Britain set eyes upon the continent, and only days apart from each other in 1820. There are maps which prove otherwise. I have shown them. The 1587 Urbano Monte map has also been shown in other places, but might as well do so again. Take a good look at it. Beautiful, I know. Don't fight the tears. Cry if it is required of you. For starters, the year actually reads I-587 on the map if you zoom in on it. But then pay attention to Antarctica. There's no snow on it. It's inhabited with exotic creatures, telling us that the map is much older than the 16th century. I'm wondering now if the ice was intended to keep intruders out of the Undying Lands at a later hour. And another thing, Antarctica may take on the appearance of a ring, but there are canals leading through it as well as water on the other side. They're separate continents, not one. It's not just one ring. The realm is much larger and goes well beyond what we are ever shown. The ice wall was apparently first discovered by British naval officer Sir James Clark Ross during his 1839 through 1843 expedition to Antarctica. I checked. Ross was a Freemason. By the time of his initiation into the Brotherhood on December 9th, 1835, Ross had already discovered, quote-unquote, the North Pole. This apparently explains why the lodge listed the North Pole as his place of residence. How adorable. His voyage to Antarctica was a follow-up attempt to determine the position of a proposed South Magnetic Pole. It was the ice wall which stopped him. Upon confronting the massive boundary marker of ice, he famously remarked, "It was an obstruction of such character as to leave no doubt in my mind as to our future proceedings, for we might as well sail through the cliffs of Dover as to penetrate such a mass. It would be impossible to conceive a more solid-looking mass of ice. Not the smallest appearance of any rents or fissure could we discover throughout its whole extent, and the intensely bright sky beyond it but too plainly indicated the great distance to which it reached southward." Ross and his expeditionary fleet sailed around the ice wall for a great number of months. Between pit stops at the Cape of Good Hope and his polar expeditions, he spent the next several years of his life circumnavigating the Southlands vainly in search of a passage to the other side, or so we're told. The reality is that there are several ice walls, not just one, even if we are to go by the official narrative. Ross's inability to find the imaginary magnetic South Pole or whatever just proves the greater realm only so much as the Christopher Columbus story, wherein he went seeking for a passage to India, but happened upon hundreds of miles of American coastline instead. For all I know, the British admiral was seeking out the location of the Camp of Yah, seeing as how it likely wasn't found in Hyperborea. Fun fact, this guy, I picture him right there, was on Ross's Antarctica voyage. Joseph Dalton Hooker is his name. It was while on the Erebus, the ship, staring up at the impenetrable ice wall, that Hooker spent his lonesome hours reading Charles Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle, which had been personally provided to him by none other than Charles Lyell. It should be noted that Hooker and Darwin were good friends. Their correspondence began after Darwin's return from the Galapagos Islands and continued unhampered throughout his development of the evolutionary theory. In 1858, Darwin wrote that Hooker was the one living soul from whom I have constantly received sympathy. At the historic debate on evolution held at Oxford University Museum on June 30th, 1860, it was Joseph Hooker, alongside Thomas Huxley, who defended it. I just thought I'd let you know the sort of people whom we're dealing with. Now, here is what Antarctica really looks like according to the map in our firmament. In this unexpected cosmology, we are dealing with many Antarcticas rather than just one. All those varying dots represent a different landing point. You might be wondering how such a conclusion was reached. Well, credit once again goes to Vibes of Cosmos, and a link here to his Antarctica video. What he did is measure the distance between each reported Antarctic base camp with their respective countries as they are represented on a globe, and then match them up with those locations on the moon map. I mean, it's sheer brilliance. Most can be found on the opposite end of the world than the unseen realm. Remember the lost continent of Lemuria? They're camped upon it, And look, there is the bird station. Seems more apparent than ever what Admiral Byrd was talking about in that cranky old man interview when making the rather peculiar claim. Strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being, and that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole from Little America. He's not referring to the hidden wilderness. North and South America can be found in the east, to the east of Lemuria, and it's bigger than either of them. The camps which have my interest, though, are on the opposite end of our realm. You have to look back at the picture. Haley Stations 1 through 6 and Signy Station, as well as Neumayer Station 3. The first two are British run, the other is German. All three happen to land on the coastlines of Terra Vista, the massive continent which I am proposing is the hidden wilderness. What lies between them but the lost continent of Atlantis? It's west of Africa, positioned directly where so many have claimed. But it also happens to land precisely where St. Brendan places blessed land. Look again, it's nearly situated in the center of the world. One can only wonder if the camp of Yah can be found there. All right, I have one portion left, and then we're going to finish up tonight. So if you need caught up, this is on page 63. I need another drink of coffee. Moon map and the Prague clock. And this really is where it all comes together, in my opinion. Fact of the matter is, we do have an Antarctic circle. It is not constantly fixed in the north and south poles of the globe model as we were taught, though. The location of our ice wall changes every so many 100 or 1,000 years, and at a crawling rather than breakneck speed, freezing new land in its path while simultaneously melting its hind trails as it moves along the outer edge of our realm. Try to explain something like this to the normies. It can't be done unless they are first willing to accept the reality of the flat Earth, and then they'll no longer be a normie anyways. The Prague astronomical clock is key in understanding all of this, and so I will attempt to show you how it works in accordance with the moon map. Allegedly installed in the quote-unquote medieval age of 1412 to be exact, the Prague clock is located in the Czech Republic, and though not the first of its kind, is said to be the oldest surviving in the world. Impressive. It was built during the Dark Ages, and people still struggle to understand it. Medieval, as you know, is code word for the Millennial Kingdom. They all knew. The clock mechanism has three main components: the astronomical dial representing the position of the sun and the moon in the sky, statues of various saints, as well as a notable skeleton who represents death when striking the time, and a zodiac calendar dial representing the months. At the outer edges of the clock face, golden Schwabacher numerals on a rotating ring represent old Czech time, with 24 indicating the precise time of sunset. So that's on the, if you look at that picture, there's on the outer, what I'm describing, and that actually turns to line up with the hours of the day, the Roman numerals, when you can expect sunset on that given day. And next, we see Roman numerals displaying a repeated run of 12 for morning and afternoon hours. So it goes 1 through 12 and then 1 through 12, just like we say AM, PM. The sun and the moon are accounted for on the ecliptic. Look at where their dials meet. They are fixed in place in the center of the clock, forming a cross. You can see the cross right there, a Latin cross. The inner circle contained within that cross, what is known as an ecliptic dial, carousels around the entirety of the clock face. Each zodiac side represents a month of the year, with the vertical lines measuring 5 days. This is important because the zodiac is the clock face in the sky above us. Hopefully I don't need to go over that for you guys. It's pretty easy to imagine. I mean, there's a zodiac, 12 constellations. The sun travels through each of them. Every year at the March equinox, the location of the sun within the zodiac determines what age we're currently inhabiting. There are, of course, 12 constellations of the zodiac if you need a refresher. It takes roughly 2,150 years for the sun to present itself among a new zodiacal constellation at the vernal equinox, with a precession that lasts 25,800 years in total. So just to repeat that, so again, right now we don't really know if we're in the age of Pisces or Aquarius, but at the spring equinox every year, the sun still starts out in Pisces or Aquarius, and it takes nearly 26,000 years for the sun to go all the way around the zodiac in its beginning in March, or the spring equinox. The difficulty is in determining precisely when one constellation boundary ends and another begins. But I am thinking it was designed that way so that the ages blend together. Well, it is generally agreed that the sun passed from the constellation Aries to the constellation Pisces with the advent of Hamashiach, or perhaps a century earlier. What is certainly true is that the sun has saluted us from Pisces throughout the span of Yahusha's earthly life, as well as the millennial kingdom, not forgetting the intervening years of the short season where we find ourselves now. And everybody's wanting to know when and if the sun has entered the age of Aquarius yet. I have seen any number of dates suggesting the starting date, 2012 being a popular contender. 2021 has also been declared. And still others have claimed it won't be entered for another few hundred years yet. It's still a long ways away. Take the ecliptic dial off the Prague clock, apply it to the moon map, and what do we see? A wheel within a wheel. For starters, everything pivots in accordance with the location of true north, which in turn rotates around Polaris, the very center of our realm. The ring containing visible land masses represents the Arctic Circle that I was earlier reminding you of. The circuit of the sun and the moon can be found within. Everything beyond the ring is the easily recognizable crescent moon, a popular symbol all over the world. That happens to be where the Ice Age resides at any given time. At present, we find ourselves in the first picture, stage left. But in so many thousand years, perhaps in the age of Capricorn or Sagittarius, the circuit of the sun and the moon will have rotated around to the illustration on the right, bearing most of our known realm in ice and darkness. Those who insist the kingdom of heaven is eternal and that we therefore cannot possibly be post-millennial are absolutely true on the first claim. The kingdom is eternal. It will never be broken. And of course, the kingdom is within. But that is not to say its people aren't free to chase the warmer weather. My family hightails it to Florida every winter. Or in the case of our controllers, the set apart are free to pursue the light of Yahusha on the other end of the world. The kingdom still exists. Look out your window, why don't you? Ironically, it may just be our current sun with its endless platonic allegories, which proves to be the outer darkness after all. Again, it takes something like 26,000 years for the entire cycle to play out, apparently. That's nearly 4 separate creation weeks. We're counting 7, 14, 21, 28. 3 if there are centuries of chaos and void between each destruction and reset event, whereas only darkness and the howling wind remains a constant. This was brought up last week. I thought it was brilliant. The idea that 7,000 years ends and then there's just a chaos and a void for however many hundreds of years until the next reset, until everything gets rebooted and the next creation week begins again. It makes you wonder if there truly are resets and new creation weeks every so many thousands of years while magnetic north rotates the heavenly carousel around the moon face. And then how many earth-worn artifacts testify to the former inhabitants of our realm on the last go-round? If you need me to kind of reiterate that, archaeologists will talk about finding, digging up things in caves and saying this is, 30,000 years old. Well, what if it really is? Just something to consider. Also, how do you suppose our controllers feel about this, knowing that their kingdom of dirt is destined to be discovered by a whole new regime of pimps and handlers in another 25,000 years or so? It's not like they can keep continent hopping and migrating with the magnetic wheel if what I'm insinuating about the hidden wilderness is true. Seems to me that the weather would be an important topic, as it's about to get butt cold around here. I think I could have ended that on a more graceful note. I apologize for that, but that concludes my discussion on the hidden wilderness. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I am spent. That took me over 2 hours, and I'm going to sit here and listen to you guys criticize me over it. So, case closed. I hand it over to the jury. It's all yours.
Well, thanks for that, Noel. And sorry I kind of jumped in at the end. So I'm just perusing the pages as I was looking through to see what else you covered. And I'll have to definitely go back and read it all and listen to it when you post it. But just at the end part, when you talked about the marking of the ages, I remember in my research pulling up Stellarium and going back to when I consider the possibility of when Yahusha was actually born. And I swear I literally was able to see the change move into Pisces at that time. And I'd have to like go do it again and maybe pull up a screenshot, but it was one of those things that just kind of floored me when I noticed, the movements, the sun and the constellations, and how it definitely like kind of, like you said, it is kind of blurred, but it also was, I don't know, there was something about it that it just looked like a marker to me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was, obviously, just to reiterate, what I was insinuating, the possibility that the entire ministry of Messiah from his beginning through the Millennial Kingdom was all the age of Pisces. And the age of Aquarius maybe has already begun. Maybe it won't start for another 100 years. I really don't know. That everyone has different thoughts on that. I mean, there's going to be a certain point where everyone's like, okay, it's clearly in the age of Aquarius. But the debate is, where is the boundary of it? That might be the start of the new kickstart of the new week, new creation, new heavens and earth. And one thing, I started out talking about how I was visiting with John Q today, and we were kind of talking about this briefly. And I noticed he put in the comments there how there's reports of that the earth is actually getting colder. Now, there's two reports happening. You're going to see it in the mainstream media where they're talking about global warming and how everything's melting. But then there's other tests out there that they're showing that the icebergs are strengthening. Well, according to this theory of the Prague clock with the moon map, is that as it takes 20-something thousand years to go around the Earth, the rotation it's moving, and so the glaciers would be melting as it's moving around the clock face, but they're getting colder in the back. Now, if you look at the locations, most of the Antarctica locations proposed on here are actually getting colder. They should be getting colder, but then there are some Antarctica stations that would be getting warmer as the sun is moving in. So it makes me wonder if they can pull from both reports, and they could show some parts of our realm that are getting warmer and others that are getting colder, because it's a natural movements of the sun and the moon around the polar, the magnetic pole of the north.
No, you did a great job pulling together the research and more or less outlining how the Millennial Kingdom can be existing in our time. I love discussing these theories and options that are out there, because there's so much that is hidden from before our eyes that the research that we all do collectively and share will help us better understand, maybe not the full truth of this realm, but at least know that there's more to it than what we're being fed, for sure. So just great job.
Thanks, Rob, and it's always good to see you here.
Yeah, sorry I've been out. Lots of personal things going on.
Where did the beginning of the moon map first come from? Like, it is obviously quite a new phenomenon or something, or I've just not really heard so much about it. I have heard about it in the last maybe 6 months it has come out, but do you know where the origins of the moon map have come from?
Well, that's a very good question. The oldest that I can find is from the 1964 interview, which I comment on here. I also have the whole interview on cosmology of the individual saying that the Earth is he says that the Earth is a reflection of the moon is a reflection of the Earth, which I kind of disagree with that a little bit, but he says that the continents are represented there exactly as the moon map shows. And I think that they more recently, this is like, Flat Earth 2.0 research. And I don't know who brought it to the forefront, but I can tell you that the YouTube channel Vibes of Cosmos, which I posted 2 links now. I want to give that guy credit. It's not me. He has dedicated his entire channel just time and again, like 4 to 7 minutes. They're very short, and he just takes you through and shows you all the measurements of everything and how they match with our realm. And I've watched enough of those videos ago. There is no way this is a coincidence. No possible way. Like this is legit. This is the most legit map I've ever seen. Now, ironically, it's not a map that you can really use today because the world has changed. And I theorize that it was burned into the moon as a photograph, probably during the creation week, pre-flood, at least at some point in history. Why not the creation week? It's like the best way to say that. And so it's not like you can use that, to sail to places today, but you can get an idea of what the greater realm looks like. Also, the idea that the moon is plasma. I don't know the earliest reference to that, but I did refer to the guy in 1965 who said that the moon was plasma, and so that's a big research point now. And, it ties into like Nikola Tesla, all that. I could, there were so many avenues I could go down. I just didn't have time for it. It looks like you wanted to say something, Lisa.
Well, it made me think of. It kind of makes sense then why the sun and the moon didn't appear, quote unquote, until the fourth day, because all the land masses had to be in place. And then, like, the picture was taken, I guess. I don't know.
Well, don't forget the firmament too, because it's yeah. It seems like that's the firmament in there. I think it really is the dome in the sky.
Well, yeah. Well, the firmament was required to create the space, right? To separate the waters out. And then the land had to appear, the dry land all had to appear. And then, I don't know, I guess there was grass and stuff. And then the sun and the moon came after the land was kind of established. So it just made me think of that's how the picture on the moon was embedded or whatever. It had to happen after the land was established. I don't know.
Right, that's my thoughts as well. Mary asking here, can you speak a little more about what the eth, a left tav marker means, as it is written in the Sefer? So that's one of the points when you pick up a Sefer in the opening. Stephen Pidgeon, who did the main part of the translation, he talks about how it's in the Hebrew. And it's being removed from basically all translations. They don't really know what to do with it. A lot of times there'll be these little symbols or other things in the Hebrew, and they totally leave them out. And he also talks about that in like Genesis 1:1, how translators will radically alter it because they don't know what to do with some of it. And according to him, maybe there's some people who believe differently, but according to him, he believes that it's a marker for divine. And you can read more on his notes in there. But it's interesting because it does appear in a lot of places in the Bible where it talks about something being divine. Patrick asks if every age has a millennial reign. I mean, that's an interesting thought, right? So by millennial reign, a better way we could phrase that is a day of Sabbath rest. So if there's a model of the Torah that's continued throughout history, I would say yes. I mean, I would say that there'd be 6,000 years and then a year of rest, whatever that looks like in each narrative as it unfolds. I don't see an issue with that at all. But what Lisa said last week at the end of her video, that blew my mind, Lisa, when you said that. I started, because I was always thinking that you can't break the cycle. It's got to be 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. But this idea that you could just have, and maybe she didn't phrase it quite like this, but it's how I take it, is that you could have a destruction event. You could have 7,000 years destruction event, and then you could have just chaos and void and nothingness and windswept landscapes for 50,000 years of nothingness. And then just boom, you start the cycle again, start another creation cycle. So just kind of throw that out there that and the discussion was in, when does the 8th great day begin? And I was under the impression that the 8th great day has to be immediately after the 7th day, but it doesn't. It could kickstart at a later time. Like we could be going through 500 years of a short season and it's not accounted for in the 7th or the 8th day. Hopefully that doesn't confuse anybody, but that really had got me thinking about that a lot.
So with that thought, then does Satan ever just end and be destroyed and thrown in the lake of fire, if that's true?
Well, yes. I mean, according to I guess, one of the questions is how old is Satan, right? I mean, everyone's going to have different views on that. Was Satan a result of this creation cycle, or did he predate into old creation cycles? At what point did he go bad? That would be an interesting theory, a study all in itself. And I would imagine that I wouldn't have decisive answers on that, because I think there's probably some different views. But very clearly, that he's thrown into the lake of fire and with death, and so that time is coming. And when you get into Enoch's calendar, when you get to the 10th week, he says that the cycle starts all over again, and the righteous are in the new heaven and the new earth, and so on and so forth. So for us, I think Satan serves his purpose for us in our narrative. He is the accuser, right? He's trying to get us to sin, to break the law so he can accuse us. But once his function is complete, he's not needed anymore. He's destroyed. And so I guess the question we could then, theorize, well, what about other creations, and will there be other Satan characters and stuff? That's a whole nother thing. But this dragon character, let's just not assume that there's many Hasatans at this point. There are, but we're talking about the serpent of old, right? The dragon. Yes, he's coming to an end. I can't wait, and it's gonna be he'll be done for, and he knows it's coming. Obviously, it's like in so many songs you see, like that 80s song "Burning Down the House." Like the fire's coming. We're gonna keep partying while the house burns down. There's that Duran Duran song from James Bond, we're going to dance into the fire, right? Like it's like this idea that like we're going to accept our fate as it comes. The fire's coming, but we're going to embrace it, and we're going to party on to the end when we're destroyed. What were you going to say, Nikki?
Well, and with that, with the square and compass, the G, well, Enoch 69:6 says that his name is Gadriel, who it said that the third, talking about the angel who was fallen, Gadriel, it is he who showed the children of men all the smitings of death, and he led astray Hawa, and showed the shield of the coat of mail, and the sword for battle, and all the weapons of death to the children of men. Just a thought on what that G might mean.
Okay. That's interesting. That is a good thought.
Yeah, I don't know, but thanks. It was a great teaching. Thank you.
I was I was actually booking it at the end of this week, trying to get this all done. Because I'm like, I'm not gonna make it. I was watching Sabbath approach. Once Sabbath hits, I'm like, I'm done. I like sit down my work. And I so wanted to get the prog clock. I was like, man, none of this is going to come together if I don't have the prog clock in there. So I'm glad I was able to at least, I had to gut some stuff out. I talked about like other references like Pearl. I actually wanted to talk about, so I talked about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. I wanted to talk about C.S. Lewis and Narnia, and how Aslan's country is depicted as a ring around the earth and all that. But obviously, I could go on and on talking about all that stuff, but I think the point was made.
Yeah, you got a good point on the Narnia piece. Is they enter that realm through the wardrobe, and it's a hidden realm. Whether you want to call that the straight way or a secret passage, these little clues, or these the way they view these things is pretty interesting. How they put it out there in front of us, that there is more out there than what we are aware of.
Do you think that these elitists really know, like, that I know that they're saying they're hiding stuff from us and that, but do you honestly think that they really know that all these things out there, or that everybody's in on it, or just you think that's just a select few? Because I was thinking about even back in the in the 1800s, when we think about all the orphan children and stuff, and how they were put across the world and into these different cities and stuff, and a lot of things kind of were hidden then, and obviously we're into the realm that we are in now. But yeah, I just kind of think to myself, like, do you think that they even know any of that? And my second question is, in any of the books that you have read, extra biblical texts, have you ever come across anything about the short season, about Satan and how long that short season might have been? I mean, I've read a lot of extra biblical texts and have not seen anything myself, but I was just curious maybe if you've come across anything.
No, I haven't, and I think that's okay. I'll get to the like who's in the know here in a second. That's the thing about the short season, right? It's an age of deception, and I think it's purposely vague. And I think it's purposely vague to like not even know you're in the short. We're not supposed to know we're in it, and it's kind of like I mean, if they told you all the secrets, then we could figure this out, right? It would be easier, and it's almost like Yah's like, okay, I've given you my law, I've given you my instructions of righteous living, and that's all you need to get through this dark time. Like, this is the light for you. This is the lamp. Okay. You guys, the rest you guys will be led through this. Otherwise, because people are like, always like, what now, Noel? What does this all mean? It's the same thing. Just do what he's told us to do. Right. And then we're not going to be in the dark, so to speak. In terms of like how many people know, obviously I couldn't answer that. It's like, does Hillary Clinton know, right? Does Elon Musk know? Does Donald Trump know? Like, does Whoopi Goldberg know? Who knows? And where does this begin and end? I would think that most don't know. But the thing is that you look at the fact that like most people, even a lot of flat earthers, don't know that the international flight paths are all controlled by NASA. There's a reason why planes have to keep on a very specific flight path. Do pilots know? No, but they keep to NASA's flight plans. And so whoever is making these flight plans, you guys probably have all seen how they can't just go through the southern hemisphere. They have to go up to the north to go back to the south. Somebody has to know. Somebody has to be designing those flights specifically. I mean, you figure that there are people who are asking questions. Well, why can't we just go from Africa to South America and Australia, right? Why do we have to fly up to London first from Africa before going back to South America? And at a certain level, there would have to be people that know. They would have to be, and I just can't answer how many, right? Yeah, as John. Oh, go ahead, John. I was going to say what you just said. Go ahead and say it. Oh no, Rob, you're speaking. Let me just say what John is saying here real quick. He says that compartmentalization and need to know is big in the intel community. Famously, it was the atomic bomb and the Manhattan Project, which, my view is that there was no atomic bomb that was ever dropped. It was firebombing, which is actually far worse and far less merciful than an atomic bomb. It was but thousands of little tiny bombs, like grenade type bombs that are dropped down, thousands of them, that create like these like whirlwind conditions of just pure heat and fire that goes and melts and destroys everything. And they did this all through Europe. It was awful. They firebombed hundreds of cities in Germany and in Japan. But the Manhattan Project, it had hundreds of people. I don't know, was it thousands? There were tons of people on this. And, famously, they didn't know what one person was doing from the left to the right. There was also another story of like the first computer that was designed in World War II, and it was all run by women, and they didn't know what they were building. They did not know they were building a computer. They didn't find out for like another 50 years. When you're getting into the intel community, it's like that. It's all on a need to know basis. You're going according to the script. Probably a lot of them believe space is real and all that. They probably think we're, anyone who questions this is an idiot. Go ahead, Rob. What were you going to say?
No, that was exactly what I was going to mention. Is in the military and an intel world, it's all very compartmentalized so that you can have a very few on top knowing all the information is disseminated separately, individually, so no one knows one left hand from the right. So yeah, you're right.
No, wasn't it you who did a presentation on, was it Trudeau? And when he was, I think, a boy, they went to Antarctica at some sort of base for a special like military award ceremony or something like that. And so it's obviously the higher up you go, they know, it's just how many people and about what, so a lot of them know the earth is flat, but then how many of them know the moon map is real thing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that wasn't me that gave the presentation on him, but I don't know who gave that presentation. But yeah, again, I agree with those sentiments that like, I mean, here's the thing about the moon map. I'm sold on this. This is, I mean, I've looked at a lot of the research on this. I think this is totally legitimate. It's there's too many there's too many coincidences for this to be a coincidence at this point. But again, how many people know that the moon is a map? I do think that's, again, I pointed out in here, when you're going up to the Apollo 11 moon landing, really all the Apollo 8, the 9, 10, which, you know, flew around the moon and photographed it, and then 11, 12, 13 onwards, what ideas were they trying to defeat? They were trying to defeat the idea that the moon was plasma, because they put that out there. They were trying to defeat the idea that the moon is a map of the Earth. They put that out there. So, and they were trying to defeat the idea that the Earth is flat. They put all three of those ideas out there in the 60s, with guys saying that they would be proven correct, that NASA was a hoax. They were saying that, and NASA's like, nah, you know, we're going to use a hoax to prove you guys wrong. And so that had to be on their mind, that the moon is a map. It had to be, or else they wouldn't have put it out there. So again, I don't know how many people know that, but it's something we're just discovering. Just like in 2015, we were like, what, the Earth is flat? And they've known all along. I think it's the same thing with the moon map. I think as we start looking at this more, we're going to start going, yeah, much more people knew about that than we gave credit for. I mean, I look up at it now, and it's like, it's almost a full moon tonight. I think it might be tomorrow night or the next night. And you look up there, and it's like, I've looked at it so much, I can see it. I'm like, that's a map of our realm. I mean, I could see North and South America in there with the naked eye. It's kind of hard. You have to get, you know, maybe better binoculars or something, but it's all there.
Yeah, I agree. I remember the second I first heard, I don't know if it's you I heard it first from or someone else, but I looked up at the moon at a full moon, and I'm like, there's no way that is not a map of our realm, at least at some point. And the other, I don't remember the name of the book you were reading from about the 500 years to travel around the Earth and then from heaven to heaven to heaven. That was really interesting. So thanks for sharing that.
That came from Legends of the Jews, and the thing about Legends of the Jews is that it's it's one of those things. Every time you read from it, I know everyone gets their salt shakers out and starts, you know, salting the bowl of soup that I give them. But Legends of the Jews, it's essentially a guy basically sourcing all these ancient books, and they're, you know, the Earth is flat in all of them, and it's you know, you're going to get some propaganda in there and Talmudic stuff, and you're going to get some Kabbalah stuff and a lot of different stuff, and you kind of have to sort through it all. But I find Legends of the Jews to be absolutely phenomenal, and just the things that they talk about in there that you can't talk about that stuff anymore. People just look at you with like, what in the world is that? And I love just reading through Legends of the Jews and discovering stuff paragraph by paragraph.
Yeah, what direction should we be considering moving? The cold is coming in and the warm is going out.
That's actually a really good question. Actually, let me pull this up and look at it again. Give me a second here. See if I can find it. Go back to the moon map. Because, you know, the way it works, it's really interesting because, so if we're actually, okay, here on the eastern seaboard of America, it's going to be the Ice Age here first. Because if you're on the eastern seaboard, you are on the outer edge of the realm. And it's interesting because if anyone has ever been on a flight to Europe from America, and I used to ask this all the time. I used to go as a teenager, and to Europe or whatever, and I would look and I go, why are we going up to the North Pole to go over to Europe? I'd look at the map and go, we should just cross over I thought we crossed over the Atlantic. Nobody crosses over the Atlantic. They're just directly over. They have to go up and over. And people would say, oh, well, you know, we're going over the curve of the Earth and you have to go up and over to do it. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Because if the Earth is an equal ball, you can go straight out this way and reach her just as fast. But when you look at the moon map, it lines up with the AE map. that in North America, you have to go way up and over to go to Europe first, and then Africa, and then on, so on and so forth. So if there's a way you could do this, is that if you were to just go straight out from Florida or New York or whatever, just keep going straight out east, you would eventually come around to the unknown lands. I mean, the distance would be like, I don't know, nobody could survive that. Nobody would get the fuel to do it or food or whatever. I mean, that was a huge journey, and I think we'd all be dead. But it's, yeah, so that's going to be buried first, and then it comes back. Like Africa seems to be like the last one. They'll be the last one they'll be in the heat for the longest. But again, though, that's going to take like 4,000, another 4,000 or 5,000 years to do that. So I don't think anyone here has to worry about that too much. But this is also played into, for those of you who have been following for the last couple of years as I've been going through this, I've been on the journey of trying to figure out the identity of the physical land of Israel, as well as what happened to that, as well as now looking at it like the UK, which I now believe is the epicenter of the Millennial Kingdom, and that is literally the land of Israel that was handed over to the tribes of Israel after the divorce. But that has furthermore cemented into my mind this idea that the land itself is not eternal. There's promises of eternal land and other things like that, and paradise and things, but it's not the physical real estate there. That's going to be buried in ice and snow, assuming this keeps going on and on and on, if that makes sense to anybody. Let's say there was a scenario that 10,000 years from now, the hidden wilderness is now the land under the sun and the moon. That would mean that we're all going to be in the ice age over here. And North America might be the hidden wilderness, and the land on the other side might be the Israel, the promised land. Does that make sense to anybody? He can keep just moving the real estate as you go around.
Noel, I have a quick question. Would you think that the second Exodus already happened? And the reason I ask that is because that's something I've been just kind of tossing back and forth after learning about the Millennial Kingdom. And the thing that gets me is how it says that no longer, that one scripture, and I forget if it's in Jeremiah, but it says no longer will they say, like the Elohim that took them out of Egypt, but then they will say, the Elohim who rescued them from all ends of the earth, just kind of referencing that he's going to be known for this greater second Exodus. And the thing that gets me is that this is like hidden and no one knows about this. So do you think that if that they were already, Israel was already taken, would that have been the second Exodus, or are we in line for the second Exodus? I know I'm not even sure if we can know for sure, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Right. So this is one of those answers where I once again steal people's hopes and dreams. But I think the second Exodus already happens, and there's the hope, though, is that in prophecy we see repeated events, right? We see repeated blood moons, we see repeated stars falling from the sky, we see repeated locust events or what have you, right? Repeated flood events, fire events, and so I do believe the second Exodus did happen. I believe that Israel was gathered, probably under the banner of Elijah, literally, and that that all ushered in the Millennial Kingdom. But the thing is, though, is that we're still waiting for the final the final revealing of New Jerusalem, right? And so we're scattered all over the earth, and either you or someone else had asked tonight about another reference to the short season. There is one other book that I have found. It's called the Book of Two Pearls, and it does talk about the short season. It refers to it cryptically, calling it the 10 days. And I don't really know what the 10 days are. I need to look more at that. Is that reference to, like, are we spanning that up to 1,000 years? What is it? But it says at the end of the short season that everybody dies. It says that New Jerusalem comes down, and that's really interesting. It straight out says the millennial kingdom. It says the millennial kingdom is 1,000 years, then the short season, and then it says New Jerusalem comes down, and at the end of it, right? So the not at the beginning of the millennial kingdom, but at the end of the short season, and it says that it's a refining fire that is cleansing the earth, and everybody died. Nobody's getting out of this alive. We're all dying. I hate to tell you guys that, but that's what it says. We're all dying. But it says that the righteous, there's going to be an act of mercy on the righteous, and that they will be put to sleep into like a holy sleep, and that they're going to fall asleep and they're going to wake up, and there it is. All the righteous will be there. Hey, here, here's a beer. Here's New Jerusalem. Come on in. And the wicked will be wiped off the face of the earth. So that, to me, that's the next event we're waiting for is New Jerusalem. I don't really see it as an Exodus, just because, I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's a third Exodus, but it's not like we're not being led out of a terrible situation so much as heaven is coming to earth, and it's different than fleeing Egypt, right, or fleeing Babylon or something like that. It's a different picture being provided.
Where did you find the Book of the Pearl that you were referencing to?
Oh, good question. Where did I find that? I don't know where I found it. It's a very rare read. It's but it's fascinating nonetheless. It comes from more of the LXX. There's like I pointed out that it's like in the Back to the Future 2, where there's a paradox where there's two 1985s, and that's like how the Bible's written. There's these two narratives, right? There's the Masoretic timeline and the LXX timeline. Which is correct? Are they both correct? Those are things I'm trying to think through and work out. But it goes with the LXX timeline, the 6,000 year approach. I'm sorry, the Messiah came in like 5,500, and that the millennial kingdom started in the year 6,000. And I don't know. I'd have to look again. I have it in on my computer. Obviously, I don't know where I found it, but there's some really fascinating things in there.
Last time you mentioned it, Noel, I went and looked it up. I just typed it into Google, and it came up readily enough, and I read the whole thing on Google. So whoever asked that question, you should be able to find it on Google. It was not too long ago. I did it like within the past 8 months.
I find the name interesting of the book, like I say, in the Pearl, because there's so many references to the Pearl, and you think about, the gates being, one pearl. And I think even some of the movies that they have, they're always in reference to the pearl. And then you think of the pirate's hair being almost like the black pearl. And I just thought it was really interesting, the name.
Yeah, and the book Pearl, which I didn't I mentioned, but I didn't have time to go through it. It's you find out that the pearl is actually, so a father, his daughter dies, and she's like young, like 4 years old or something. And you find out that his daughter is Pearl, and he's able to go to the hidden wilderness, and described exactly like St. Brendan. He goes exploring it for days. There's a river there. In that story, it's his daughter, 4-year-old daughter, but she's a glorious, beautiful, like resurrected woman, and like a bride of Messiah at that point. And she stops him, and she doesn't let him go further. But it ends kind of on a tension, because he's really angry that his daughter got taken from him, and at the end of it, he's even angry that his daughter is where she's at. Oddly enough, it's almost like a picture of like the way C.S. Lewis would define someone in hell, almost, or like you see that the unrepentant man in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And the tension is that his daughter says that he has to go back and live a life that is worthy to go there. And so you don't really know if he will. You don't know if he will, like, if he's going to go back and want to love Yah and obey him in a way that would give him permission to be there. It's kind of an interesting book. Very beautiful little story. Yeah, it's called Pearl. It's known as Arthurian literature because King Arthur is never mentioned in it, but it was discovered in a manuscript that the manuscript had Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a popular King Arthur tale, and it had the pearl in it as well. And there was only one copy ever found. So just there's a discussion going on in there about Yahusha and like who is he? You know, if he's not the father, and so on and so forth. And it's great discussion. But if I could just jump in there, the question was just put, you know, to be clear, do you guys believe Elohim, the son of Elohim, Elohim the son, I should say, was always in existence or was a created spirit? My personal view is that he was at one time a created spirit. He's literally the son. It's not just figurative. There's a passage in what chapter is it in John? It's like chapter 12 or 13 in the whereabouts, and Yeshua says to his disciples that everything he says and everything he does is only because he was told, taught, or observed it from his Father. And I was thinking about this, that's further proof of the feminine Ruach HaKodesh, in my opinion. Like if Yahusha is the creator of this world, and that, I guess that's the big debate, right? Was it Yahuwah or Yahusha? What was the family project look like? And I'm under the current belief that Yahusha is literally the creator of the world, that the Father handed over the Son, create this world, and he did it. And he could only create according to what he observed from his Father. So he was a literal creation of his Father. He was begotten of his Father. And he created Adam and Eve because he saw it with his parents. He saw that he had a father and mother, and so he created a man and a woman.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was you or someone else the other day that said whenever, in Genesis 1, where Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light, that it was actually Yahusha who he created, and it was the light, which I thought was very profound.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the views. Don't quote me on this, but I think that's Zen Garcia's view, that the "Let there be light" was a creation of Yahusha. I'm not 100% sure on that. I've tried to get to the bottom of his view on that. I'm not sure where I stand on that. What I do think more and more, and Pam left the room. She's been talking to me about this, and I want to have further discussions on the Paleo Hebrew. And just so you guys all know, Paleo Hebrew is the original Hebrew, right? Not the Babylonian script that we get in modern Hebrew. And she was talking about how the Paleo is just a game changer. And you read it, and it's literally like, it tells you Genesis 1:1 the Son created the world, Yahushua HaMashiach, and that the separation of the light and darkness was really epic. Like, it's actually a war of the Elohim going on, and he's literally separating the dark forces from the light. I mean, really epic stuff. And I can't wait to dig deeper into the Paleo. She was just saying that, like, you get things in there that you can't even read in the Hebrew Masoretic. It's just it's so much more in depth.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was talking with Eric, the guy who's creating the Scripture Bot version 3, and he was telling me about how things can be translated so much differently, and that's why there's so many different beliefs and everything. But I believe this was, let me see. Oh, I was trying to find what he sent me, but he sent me something in Genesis. In beginning, Elohim created through Yeshua, who is the first and the last, sky waters, and through Yeshua, who is the first and the last, the earth. And that's coming from the Hebrew, which all the translations, none of them say that, So I just thought that was interesting as well.
For those of you go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, that few of the main problems I always have with Christianity and all the different churches I went to, always trying to find a church that I felt was right and never did. It became very clear to me early on that there's no way that Yeshua is God. Okay, and here are my, don't jump all over me and beat me for saying that, but here's my reasons why. When, first of all, when the apostles asked him, how should we pray? He didn't say, okay, I am God, pray to me. He said, no, pray to the Father, and he gave him the Lord's Prayer. Later on, you know, we see that every time, who's he praying to? He's not praying to himself. He's praying to the Father. And then again, all the way at the end of Scripture, we have him ascending into heaven. And does he sit on the throne? No. He sits at the right hand of the Father. You can't sit beside yourself. At the end of time, after the millennial reign, and what does he do? He hands his crown and his kingdom back over to the Father. These things always blew my mind, and I still have somewhat of a struggle with them as the true relationship of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And, you know, like I say, it's a minor struggle now. It doesn't bother me so much because I get these visions that kind of spell it out for me, but I can't put it into words, which is just so frustrating that I can't put it into words. But in my mind, in these visions, I have a total understanding, but can't put it into words.
I like that you're out there with the chickens as you're talking. I wanted to go back really quickly to what Andrew was saying about Bible bots and how there's all these different potential meanings in the Hebrew. And, you know, the translators will kind of just go with one and run with it, right? And that's where a lot of biases come in, and you can get false doctrine and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and plug this because I haven't been able to really get people's interest in this, and it's a shame. Our own Pamela Glasgow in this group, she is doing an amazing project, which she calls the Psalm Project, which I've uploaded a lot of them onto Cosmology. And she is interpreting the book of Psalms exactly as I think it should be interpreted. And what she's doing is she's not doing she's basically going through the Hebrew and showing all the potential meanings and just writing them out. And it's so beautiful and it's gorgeous. And I can't wait till she finishes it because we're going to make it into a book and I'm going to premiere it with the TUC Book Readers Club. Yeah, and it's you guys can look it up for yourself and see some of her translations, and they're beautiful. And it doesn't read like the other Psalms. It's like, wow, I didn't know there was so many meanings in that word in there.
When my children were in their late teens, early adult, we would do Bible study, and that was part of our Bible study. We'd teach them Paleo Hebrew, and one of their homework that they would go home with is that they had to translate some of the verses into Paleo Hebrew. And we did Daniel 12 and 13, and it literally does not read the same when you read it from Paleo Hebrew. Like it really is mind blowing when you start reading the scriptures in a Paleo Hebrew mindset, because what we think it says, it doesn't really say what it says. It's like almost a whole completely different story.
Yeah, and that's also, just throw that out there. It's one of the hard things about reading some of these extra biblical books. It's not that the extra biblical books, like, even if they're legit, the translation may not be. And like, I can go on to even setting the Paleo Hebrew side. I can, if we're just going by the Babylonian script, the modern Hebrew, you can go onto something like a Bible Hub, which I think is a phenomenal resource, and you could look up the Greek, the Hebrew, and you could just see all the words and figure it out, but only on the main text, like the canonical books and a few other books. You can't do that with just like throw the Testament of Job, throw that one out there, or what is it? I can't even think now. It's getting late. You guys know what I'm talking about. The Gospel of Thomas, or the Gospel of Barnabas, or the Gospel of Nicodemus, or like, I can't go in there and look at the language use. And so all I have to do is trust what these translators are saying, and I think they get it wrong a lot. And that was one of the things about talking about the hidden wilderness, right? So don't really know. It's. I think you're absolutely correct. I think that I actually think that the Bible is far more wild than any of us can imagine. I just think that what it's actually saying in there.
It kind of shocks me that so many people say that the Gospel of Thomas is, totally heresy and just so outrageous and crazy. But for me, I loved it. I thought it was amazing because I think it really went in depth in how we can have that one-on-one relationship with our Creator, through the Spirit. And that it was a fantastic read. I loved it.
Yeah, the Gospel of Thomas is probably the most taboo book out there, and the reason being is that people are told it is. Like it's like the if the Book of Enoch is like the marijuana of Christianity, then Gospel of Thomas is like crack or something like that. Like it's you only go there if you're like straight up Gnostic, but it's there's all this fear porn put into it, and I actually just read through it and did a study on it earlier this year, and I'm just like, this book's incredible. I mean, it's so good. The Gospel of Thomas. It's not what it's made out to be at all. Also, it has the Gospel of Thomas is one of the most credible books out there. It has been sourced, like it is quoted in so many ancient books that they don't want you to know about. Like they're just I believe it was an authoritative read, at least in the first century. I think it was very, very popular, the Gospel of Thomas, until the Catholic Church decided it wasn't. Yeah,
the only other book I think it's been attacked that much is Enoch. I mean, Thomas is number 2. I think Enoch is number 1. Almost there. Oh no, you can't read that stuff. That's not part of the Bible. That's not canon. And number 2 would be Thomas. It's right up there at the top, I believe.
Yeah. I would say Thomas is at the top because even with Enoch, you get into the True of the Realm. It's like the first thing people like. Oh, they turn to Enoch, start reading it. At least the first 20 chapters. But even still, like you get into Camp Torah and stuff like that, and they're all reading Enoch. But it's like, oh no, you still don't touch the Gospel of Thomas. That's forbidden territory. It's just I don't know. It's almost like I don't want to make comparisons, but it's up there. It's the top that I've ever seen.
I agree as far as those in the know, but the problem is I think very, very few Christians. I know I never even heard of the Book of Thomas until, here in the last couple of years. I think the majority of Christians have no idea that the Book of Thomas even exists. They all know about the Book of Enoch. That's why I base my assumption that way.
I was reading an article by a French translator, and he translated the Gospel of Thomas. And so the most controversial passage in the Gospel of Thomas is at the very end, when Kepha is protesting Mary Magdalene, and Yeshua responds by saying, Kepha is saying she's not worthy because she's not a man. And Yeshua responds by saying that she can only enter the kingdom if she becomes a man. And that just sends people into a tailspin. Well, this is what's really interesting about these extra biblical books and translations as a whole, is that the French guy, he did the most beautiful translation I've ever read. He said that translators are purposely translating that wrong to make it sound Gnostic. And he says that he never says that. He never swaps the sex. If he was meaning man or woman, he would have used very different words. What actually said is Kepha is protesting the fact that she is a woman. And the way the Gospel of Thomas is written by most translations is that Yeshua is actually agreeing with Peter. But that's actually very, very uncharacteristic of any kind of dialogue with Yeshua in any of the Gospels. What he does is he's always flipping it back on the table on everybody, including his own disciples. And what he says is that in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, that Mary Magdalene has to become human. Not a man or a woman, but a person. And in doing so, what he's saying is that she has to become a true person, a real person to enter the kingdom. And that's provocative in a good way. It's actually putting Kepha in the hot seat because Yeshua is twisting and saying, "Oh, you think that she's going to be less important because she's a woman, and you're downgrading her? Well, what about you, Kepha? Are you going to become a true person? Because if you don't become a true person, you're not entering the kingdom." And this is part of the sin of the translators, that because the translators wanted to make this more provocative and try to prove that it was a Gnostic text by putting that in there, you have all these Christians saying, "Don't touch this, don't read this because blah 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 blah," and this is the sin of the translators. And I can go on with that. Sarah was reading an article recently about a translator. He said he left the whole field because he started realizing he was translating the Bible, and he realized that there are certain things that cannot be translated, and they all have to lie about it. That's what he straight out said, and he said he couldn't lie, and he had to leave. So that's just one of the problems with translations, that we're kind of led astray on some things. It's fact. It's sad. It's just the way it is. I'm not trying to we have to try to push through that and understand what's being said.